breaking
Mm.
free of this fractal world of illusions and Maya, and finally becoming tuned into the other ultimate reality of stealing another culture and adding a sacred geometry logo on it, and then running it through a sales funnel program, a network marketing deployment system, and then we just sacredly scale it to 7 figures. Then we take this money and rightfully take back what is ours from the indigenous locals and set up a retreat center where other white people can come and learn how to heal by stealing their culture and offering indigenous plant medicine ceremonies that none of them are culturally, professionally, ethically, legally, or logically permitted to hold.
Hello, and welcome to the Renaissance of Men podcast. My name is Will Spencer. My guest this week is Peter Las Plantas, a New Age influencer, guru, thought leader, tech bro, and a few other things I probably shouldn't name. He's absolutely one of the most enlightened men he's ever met. And as you'll hear in our interview, the cosmos is above him and nothing is beneath him. And this lends him a unique perspective you're almost definitely about to listen to. In our conversation, we discussed how marketing funnels are the shortest route to enlightenment, where ayahuasca really came from, and it's not the jungle, why physical beauty directly equates to moral uprightness, how and why to do psychedelics at the office, manipulating women to bring out their divine feminine nature, and why building high-priced retreat centers in impoverished jungle areas is absolutely not neocolonialism. If you enjoy the Renaissance of Men podcast, thank you. I'm praying you still will after this interview, so please stick around after the first hour or so for some information that'll make it all make sense. And please welcome this week's guest on the podcast, summoned from deep within his own stargazing, down from enlightenment to speak with us common folk whose money and attention he so richly appreciates, Peter Las Plantas. Peter Las Plantas, so great to have you on the podcast. Honored to have you on, and I'm really looking forward to this dialogue together.
Thank you for having me, brother. I'm really excited to be here and to share my knowledge with you guys.
Excellent. Well, I've been following your work for a while, and I've learned a lot of things from it. I've discovered a lot of stuff I didn't know, and I'm kind of wondering, like, were you always this highly spiritually evolved?
Well, you know what? Before we get into that, I'd just like to take a minute to really, because as being the leading visionary who sat with all these plant medicines, but that was just so the plants could get a first-hand experience of what it looks like to be a fully realized and integrated beings. My ideas can sometimes be so advanced in the Aquarian age that most of your audience won't even be able to grasp it. So I think the best thing to do would just ground them with a short meditation, if you're open to that. And I know, yeah, okay, cool. That's okay. It'll also help to clear up all this non-peak state of masculine energy that's over here, that's in this space. So, yeah, let's get into it. So, as we begin, let's just acknowledge this sacred, special, sacred land that we are here on. That was given to us by Henrik, the real estate mogul who built the Sacred Retreat Center. And of course, I'd like to honor the I'd like to honor Grandmother Aya for all that she's done and shown me. Actually, sorry, one sec. Oh, shit. Sorry, I'm just getting one second.
That's fine. Your phone's ringing.
Grandma, I've told you not to fucking call me when I'm on these podcasts giving the downloads. You know what? Yeah, the space will figure it out for you. You'll be fine. Stop whining about it. Sorry, that was my actual grandma.
Was that Grandma Aya?
No, it's that Grandma Aya is amazing. My actual grandma's a bit of a pain. She just wanted me to find out when someone's going to come here because we've left her in there. Ever since she stopped being able to contribute to us in a meaningful way, we just left her there to die. But anyway, let's enough of the shadow work. Let's get back into the compassion meditation, which is also a huge life hack. So this meditation is for all levels of souls, whether you're just starting on the journey of spirituality and using it to gain more material wealth and status, or if you're a fully initiated bodhisattva who's building an empire of real estate projects and products and services that pretend to help humanity, but actually just profit off the collapse of a failing society. So let's
Mm-hmm.
begin by grounding into our sit bones and being with whatever it is that is here right now. Opening up our heart and our marketing chakra, breathing in all the light and exhaling all the gruesome, horrific, heart shattering systemic hardships of being born a white male in a first world country. Just
Mm.
let it all go, breathe it out.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, and with the next breath, just breathing out all the negativity of the women around you who aren't bisexual. And then just breathing in some more retreat spaces to host medicine journeys you're not qualified to hold. And on the final breath, when you're ready, just imagine all the ancient sentient light beings like Tesla and the Rockefellers and Christopher Columbus, and visualize a healing purple light coming in straight from the cosmos and blasting away anyone who doesn't agree with your views on polyamory and daily plant medicine use.
Mm.
Well,
Powerful.
now, yeah. And now let's just close this by anchoring in the spirit of compassion and service to humanity by selling them more courses, supplements, and retreats with this ancient Tibetan incantation. So it goes Venmo.
Venmo.
Ooh, wow. Don't you just feel all that clearing that just happened?
Yeah. Yeah. Very powerful. Wow.
Yeah. So, all right. So coming back to your question, yeah, I guess was I always this spiritually evolved? I mean, yeah, I was always initiated into the spirit world. I mean, maybe it's because of my humble grassroots salt of the earth beginnings as one of the common people, being the son of an oil tycoon, or maybe it's the 8 private schools that I got kicked out of, or maybe it's the supplement startup that I just bootstrapped with a petty 7 million and the Amex Black card that I got for my 8th birthday, and my dad's offshore Cayman Island account, and my grandfather's inheritance. But yeah, it was just bootstrapped. We built this baby with my own 2 hands. I mean, my servants' hands, but yeah, our blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, their blood, sweat, and tears. But yeah, it was when I was in my late 20s that I discovered plant medicine, and it just transformed my life because it was during this phase I was in this deep depression that no amount of yachts or summering in the Hamptons with silk robes with escorts flown in from Venezuela to tongue tickle my stinker each morning could placate. It was just I reached this rock bottom, and it was
Wow.
then that a friend gave me a book by this guy called Yogananda, and
Mm.
I don't know if you've heard of him or not, but that was the most pivotal moment in my life. I took that
Autobiography
book.
of a Yogi.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah, I've
goodness.
read it.
It's like it's a big one, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I took that book and then I crushed a rock of pure ketamine on it, which I took to help me come down off the LSD, that I took to come down off the cocaine. And it was in that moment that God spoke to me. And then I was God and I was also a dragon. But in that moment, I saw the entire cosmic riddle, the endless cycles of birth and death and loss and suffering, of being cast into the samsara with the illusion of the Maya, only for us to spend lifetime to realize that one truth, that I am the one who is behind the I am, the infinite one who is never born, will never die, and will never have to wait to get a restaurant reservation. And
Mm.
ever since then, I've lived in a complete flow state as an awakened being. And so I did what every sage has done over the centuries, like Buddha or Richard Branson. I left my enormous empire of wealth, comfort, and luxury and grueled it out in the big bad world of duality, armed only with ambition, a strong will for awakening, and a bag of unmarked bills and 13 kilograms of gold bricks. And then I went through the great white shamanic cycle of life. Have you heard of it?
I haven't. No, this is new.
It's a pretty it's like the whole circle of life. So how it starts is like there's a white guy who has everything given to him but is still dissatisfied with life. He
Mm.
blows his trust fund on drugs, and then he begins watching a bunch of conspiracy documentaries, and then has ayahuasca and faces complete ego death. Then he'll get a custom hat and custom branding and a podcast to talk about his ego death. He'll then go on to create a bogus line of spiritual products and services for the empire of spiritual consumerism, like a mushroom chocolate brand. And then he'll use his decades of network marketing experience to prey on the insecurities of people who are living in a failed society to sell them salvation for $50,000 a pop for an ayahuasca ceremony. And then finally, he's going to buy a land, build a retreat center, and name it something Sanskrit and rake in millions just for healing the collective, while catering only to the white, rich spiritual enthusiasts, chemical mystics, and CEO. So yeah, I'm just out here living this path of love, dressed in these malas and these linen pants, as a fully awakened being who's aligned his karma with his dharma with the single manas. And I'm just committed to the sacred mission of being a sacred masculine tech bro turned medicine man, turned retreat center holder, turned conscious festival thrower, turned psychedelic startup guru. Ah, yeah. Wow, that was powerful.
Oh man, that's quite a story about a funnel. I mean a journey. Really, really powerful
Yeah,
way that you recounted that. I can hear I can hear some real struggles in there
yeah,
somewhere.
yeah, yeah. It's like, just, do you know what it's like to only have an Amex Black at the age of 8, but all your friends have Amex Sapphire cards and like their own yachts? It was really, really difficult.
Wow.
Yeah.
The suffering, the real suffering of the duality in that moment must have been a lot to overcome.
I mean, it is a lot to overcome, and I don't like to talk about it unless I'm sharing my backstory or I'm about to
Mm.
sell another product. But yeah, it's quite a lot. But it's things like this that build character, and that's why I'm in this elevated social position, talking to all the people because all these difficult, grueling experiences that I've had.
Yeah, you've clearly built a legendary character. I'm sure you'd agree.
Yeah, I really have. I mean, it's not for me to say it. I think it's just I've inspired so many people. It's just that, yeah, I think like in the Vedas, it was written about my character as well, just because it's just been so inspiring. And I know the Vedas was written a long time ago, but sometimes your character can just be so strong that it just kind of goes, it just transcends the bound of linear space time.
How does it feel being the subject of prophecy?
Well, you know what? It's a lot to handle, to be honest, because it's like all these people's attention towards you, and it's like all this money coming towards you, and all these women throwing themselves at you, and it's a lot, and it really just requires me to be really grounded in the reason, in my mission, and just really being centered with my mission helps, and having an incredible uh, morning routine definitely helps with that as well. Yeah.
Can you walk the listeners a bit through your morning routine and how you stay grounded and humble?
Yeah, I'd love to. So my morning routine starts somewhere usually on a typical day. I'll sleep in till about 3 a.m. and then I wake up and
Mm.
I allow the sun to experience me. And then I'll do some ice baths, and then I'll consume every trending health food known to man and about $5,000 worth of nootropics, and then do a microdose of mushrooms, and then a microdose of ketamine, and then just a teeny microdose of peyote just to ground me. And then I'll go into
Mm.
this drug fueled rampage of quoting myself and shouting affirmations for a few minutes as I journal about more things I want to have. I am beautiful. I am powerful. I am rich. And yeah, and the morning routine will usually take me to about 2 p.m. And then I'll, get online, close some deals, and do a few IG lives, giving people my downloads, which is really highly inappropriate life advice that stems from my total disconnection to humanity because I've never really faced any sort of real struggles, or don't really have any adult responsibilities or wife or children. And the biggest commitment I've had to make was which Airbnb to choose, as I spend every waking moment obsessing over plant medicines, scaling, and polarity with the feminine. So that's usually what it takes to be in this kind of peak state of masculinity.
Wow, wow, that's quite a routine. I can relate to none of that, but I mean, I definitely know that there are probably a couple people out there who for whom that's very real.
Yeah. I mean, the best part of the day is the morning routine. You got to set yourself up for right. Really do all those meditations and all the spiritual practices so you can bring in more money, because that's really how the world will know you're spiritually aligned. So yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Now you mentioned your experience with plant medicines and
Mhm.
with grandma and grandma Io. So how did you so we have that in common. I've done a number of ayahuasca retreats in Peru and the United States as well. So how did you discover ayahuasca and maybe share with the audience what some of your
Yeah,
early experiences were like?
it's just, even just saying the name puts me back into the medicine space. So it's a super powerful thing for me,
Yeah.
uh, and it was even more powerful for the ayahuasca when I ingested her. I mean, listen, I don't want to make a big deal about this or anything, but jaguars actually have a picture of me roaring as their screensaver on their iPhone. And it's been said that
Wow.
snakes, yeah, and it's been said that snakes actually get tattoos of me so that their kundalini can rise faster. So yeah, it's a lot of being this prophetic leader of the Aquarian age. And just, I mean, if I know you must have heard of this, and just to let your audience know that the legends actually are true, that one day, deep in the Amazon, the chief of the Awinawe and the Shipibo tribes, they got together because they had this prophetic dream. And the dream said that maybe instead of, actually, certainly instead of sharing the medicines for free as a way for communities and families to heal, and having it freely accessible because it was a gift from the earth to all of humanity, they should instead start to own it and then sell this medicine not only only to the most wealthy tribes, and then use that money to get nicer headdresses and build bigger huts, which they could then use as a way to show the other villages that if they were clearly more connected to God because they had a bigger hut, more goats, and more wives. And
Mm.
should the said villagers want to experience these bigger huts, I mean God, they just needed to pay a small fee so they too could see past the illusion of Maya and earn salvation from the big dream of separation by having a bigger hut. So
Mm.
after this dream, the tribes all sent their leaders to me to come live with me in the ancient valleys of Silicon and learn the ancient ancestral ways the tribes of Bay Area. I
Mm.
mean,
Very powerful.
I I remember it was just like it was yesterday. I just come from my third chest workout of the day, and as I sat with the Shibipo chief deep in the ancestral jungles of Nomade in Tulum, he was immediately sent into the astrals by a single whiff of the scent of my high flow state, peak masculine testosterone pectoral sweat that dripped right from here. So he grabbed this and he started to bottle it. And then they took this back and started to use this to study it. And when they got a whiff of this chest, my pectoral sweat, they began weeping in sheer ecstasy. The kind of ecstasy that comes with the union with the divine, or from selling your new masterclass, or convincing your new girlfriend that she's actually into polyamory and is bisexual.
Mm.
It was really really moving. So anyways, I then taught them these songs, and they immediately bottled my pectoral sweat and took the sacrament back into the Amazons, where they fermented it over weeks and prayed over it. And then they start to inject tree roots in the jungle with my peak state masculine sweat. And this is what is known to the rest of the world as ayahuasca. So technically, you're welcome, ayahuasca.
Wow. That's a really that's a really incredible story. I hadn't actually heard that before, but that explains so much. It definitely
Mhm.
goes a long way to explaining some of the visions that people have had of you that they get
Yeah.
then tattooed. It must be awkward seeing all the tattoos of your own face. Like this is grandmother ayahuasca. It's like, well, technically,
Yeah, I mean it does, but you get used to this kind of stuff. It's like when I go
yeah.
out to the medicine ceremonies, like the people just they just want to sit around me, and just they're like, we don't even need the medicine. Like we'll just sit around your presence, and when I go out for a walk, sometimes the toad will want to just rub up against me so that they can get high, but it's not an easy path to follow, but someone's got to do it, right? So I'm doing it for
Yeah,
all of us.
man, such an act of service, such an act of service. Yeah, I remember watching one of your videos where you talked about how trees hug you, and I was like, wow, I got
Yeah,
to talk to that guy.
yeah, yeah. And it's you know, I wasn't going to bring this up, but you know, the last time I actually saw the lunar eclipse, the moon was so fulfilled after that she didn't come out for 3 weeks after. So I try not to go out during the full moons just for everyone else's safety.
Mm, mm. And I really liked how you helped introduce these native tribes to the concept of leverage. It's really important that they be
Yeah,
aware of these fundamental spiritual, economic opportunities that you bring to them. That's so important for their way of life.
yeah. I mean, they were just sitting there in the mud giving this medicine away for free, and I was like, wait, you guys could be making so much money by healing these people. And so I'm just happy to be a beacon of light in their dark rural primitive world. It's really an honor.
Very, very compassionate. Very compassionate. So we've talked about some of the other we've talked about a lot of psychedelic drugs that are part of, like, for example, your morning and early afternoon routine. Which ones?
Mhm.
I mean, you mentioned ketamine, but which other drugs have you tried, or which ones haven't you tried?
First of all, I just like to get a little clear over here that these
Mm,
are not drugs. These are sacred medicines sold by
mm,
shady individuals in robes for profit. Not like the big pharma kind of robes of where
no.
doctors are selling these medicines in pills like they've been doing for the entire, you know, past century. These guys that are selling these medicines, they actually have professional linen Tulum robes, and instead of medical degree, they have a slow speaking, eye gazing, and a voice inside their heads that tells them that they are in fact here to be the chosen ones to help and serve humanity, and serve them by asking for a sliding scale donation of $500 to $5,000 to hold space for their mushroom journey, as they
Mm,
bang on pots and pans in candlelight, calling it a sound healing. I mean, speaking of medicines that I've tried, I mean, the last time I did 5-MeO, I scaled so hard that they had to change the name to 7-MeO because I won't even look at something if it's not scaling to 7 digits. So, yeah, I did the 7-MeO. Mushrooms, kind of, yeah, I've done that. I already told you about the ayahuasca. So, yeah, I've kind of tried all the psychedelic drugs because I find the best way to heal the collective of humanity is to build my personal brand by talking about my drug induced visions and selling more products and courses and retreats and events to further my own spiritual brand instead of actually doing anything to work on solving the problems of the world, like, you know, problems like systemic racism or climate change or women being sold into sexual slavery and orphans not having enough food to eat. I mean, who has time to focus on those low vibrational realities when there's such big epidemics that we're faced with, like the polarities between men and women, like who has,
ugh,
and like semen retention. Like, I mean, honestly, if these poor people just did some psychedelics and came to one of my retreats, they wouldn't be poor anymore. And if the women did it too, maybe they would start to be paid the same as us. So yeah. So
mm.
anyways, after my first experience of oneness and seeing our inherent interconnectedness of all human beings, I woke up from the illusion and I immediately canceled the health insurance of all my employees. So yeah.
That's a that is a very that's a real way to put people into the moment.
I mean, it is the moment because who needs all these matrix things like childcare and dental insurance when I could just prescribe you some microdose mushrooms uh, and like give you a personalized relaxation sound healing meditation that I made in which I'm speaking to the ocean to help the ocean relax. I mean, why would you want childcare when you could just have microdose of mushrooms?
It's literally the same thing, literally
It's
identical. I
yeah.
mean,
So
if you can't see the difference between childcare and microdosing mushrooms, it's your own
yeah.
limited perception, clearly.
And that's what I'm trying to help them expand into, you know, just expand into this newer reality that, hey, you don't need things like, I don't know, like health insurance or dental coverage. It's like, just live in the moment, like live in the moment and you're going to be just fine. Just if they could just be in a peak state all the time, like how I am, it's just like these things won't even matter to them. But that's why I guess they're the servants and I'm the master and the ruler. So I mean, everyone's got to fulfill their legacy, right?
Have you ever considered starting a podcast to share, or maybe you mentioned earlier, to share some of these ideas more broadly? Because I think more people would really be impacted by them in various dangerous ways.
Yeah, you know what? I've actually considered that a lot. I mean, it's like I think it's just being this prophetic messenger of our times. Like I'm one of the truly most visionary leaders, and I mean, what else could help humanity than seeing two white guys talk about their problems and their views on life? It's like, could there really
Yeah.
be anything more incredibly relevant to all of humanity and society? I think not. So yeah, I mean, I can't really talk about it too much because it's under I've signed a few NDAs with some big companies, but yeah, there's some things coming out in the pipeline, and yeah, the world is really going to shift. I mean, this is what is called the Aquarian Age. The coming of the Aquarian Age is when actually my podcast drops. So yeah, I'm excited for how the world will benefit by hearing me talk about myself and the challenges that I faced trying to find my wife, and making her bisexual.
That sounds like something that a lot of people will listen to for sure. I can just
Uh-huh.
imagine you in front of a wall of flowers, wearing flowers, and just really proclaiming your excellence to everybody,
Yeah.
and everyone just bowing down.
And I think the people that would be most interested is all those, as being the superior, this incredible masculine figure. I think the people that I'm most relevant to are all men between the ages of 20 to 50 who basically grew up without a good masculine father figure and have no actual brotherhood relations. And so they have this deep void in their life that they're trying to fill through an actual connection with a man that they admire and they look up to. And so, boom, I come in, use all my network marketing to be able to fill this void and to give them this sense of belonging that society is not giving them, because these men are just focused on their careers. And yeah, it's like this void can only be filled by something as incredible as my personal brand.
An incredible opportunity to sell courses as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
So so do you find that, let's wait for this. Where do you live? Where does your friend live? By a police station?
It's just they're lining up because they thought I was doing, yeah, they knew that there's going to be female audiences listening. So they're
Oh,
just here for the safety in case all the females want to just break into my house, which happens all the time.
oh yeah, that's very thoughtful. They're cordoning off the area. It's just
Yeah,
too
it
much
was.
energy.
Billie Jean isn't the only one that had to deal with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, oh, for sure, for sure. Too much masculine energy is really drawing. They can't even understand. Like the women are just being drawn in throughout the city, just by instinct almost.
Yeah, it's like their feminine brain is just gets surpassed when my masculine presence just overpowers it, and then their brains just they're just naturally come into this surrendered state, which is obviously for their greatest benefit. So yeah,
I have a
um,
feeling that all the women listening right now are ovulating.
yeah, vulvas galore.
So you mentioned some of the psychedelics that you've enjoyed and participated in. It seems like a significant part of your life. Do you find that it interferes with your daily work? Because it seems like a lot to really be into. But I mean, how do you keep it all balanced?
That's a good question. See, it used to mess with my work until I made my work all about psychedelic use. So you see, before I became this self-appointed public psychedelic advocate who has zero actual medical training, my employees were like, Peter, it's 10 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. Are you sure you should be doing ketamine in the office? So I told them what any chemical mystic does, that this office is just an illusion, man. It's all separation. And since we call it medicine now instead of drugs, I'll just do a few bumps and then I'll just do a meditation. And then it's actually not a rampant drug addiction anymore. I mean, yeah, I
Mm.
K-holed in the meeting, but just being around my presence was able to send all my employees into deep state of samadhi. And yeah, I mean, as a progressive new earth paradigm shifting business, instead of giving my employees matrix things like a 401k or health insurance or daycare support, we just give them mushroom chocolates and a guided meditation of me in which I make sounds of the waves so that the ocean can feel more relaxed by listening to the sound of my voice.
I can feel myself entering a meditative state at the thought of it. Wow, that must be
Mm.
what an incredible set of benefits that you extend to your employees. They must be so enlightened to receive all that.
They really are, and I mean, it's a very special relationship that I have with them. I mean, I don't really know their names, but it's really special. I mean, just last week I was telling Jeremy, I was like, Jeremy, why are you stop crying about your children? I know you invested your life in our tech startup, but I'm afraid after giving myself another triple bonus, we just can't afford to keep your whole department anymore. And I told him, it's like, no, it's not that you're being fired. It's just that your dharmic bonds with this organization have reached fulfillment. And no, it's not. No, there's no severance package. Just some microdose penis envies. And yeah, we are moving your whole department to Malaysia, but it's totally not a for-profit move. It's just to balance the karmic energies, and it's for diversity and inclusion. Because I mean, those other brown people have the right to be our servants too, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if all things are one, we should all function in an all things are one economy, and we should all just merge. We're just merging companies. We're merging, and we're just breaking free of old bonds and old employees. Like it's all one, man.
It is all one, and I think that's it's really important to recognize that, because all these people can now be joined with this love of being servants and serving my empire of neocolonialism and spiritual capitalism, and that's really what unites humanity is like the love for serving a leader that is greater than themselves, who only acts in his own interest.
Super, super light. I think that's actually one of the Buddha sutras that you just quoted there.
It is. I mean, he quoted me, but yeah.
Oh yeah, thank you for correcting me. So we can hear the sounds of crowds gathering outside, and the police presence to hold them back, and so it sounds like you're pretty popular with the females. What is your current relationship status, and what's your partner's current relationship status?
Yeah, yeah. We had to have the whole house barricaded around me, just so the females wouldn't break through, because this is really peak masculine energy. But as a bodhisattva, I've taken the vow that I've solemnly declared that I will not enter heaven until every last single young, fit, bisexual goddess and embodiment coach who can remember all her past lives in Egypt but can't remember her server's name has been initiated by me personally with my sacred masculine lingam light codes. So yeah, I guess you can say I've always been a huge supporter of women's liberation movement. No, I mean, I don't mean paying them equally. Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. I mean, by having them enter my sacred harem, that's the highest rank that a woman can reach. I guess I've always been super lucky that my partners have always been bisexual. I mean, they weren't always bisexual at the start of our relationship. Like my first wife, when we first got married, she wasn't really into women at all, and she would get super pissed when I tried to have sex with all of her friends. But thanks to her deep inner journey, she discovered that she's really into holidays and jewelry and childcare and house help and not taking the bus. So, yeah, she tapped into her inner core, and guess what? She learned she actually is bisexual. And you won't believe it. But according to her human design and her Akashic record, she also happens to be bisexual only for much younger, hotter girls who have no wrinkles and very perky tits. I mean, talk about kismet, will ya? I mean, if
Amazing.
this isn't subliminal patriarchal oppression, I mean, synchronicity with the Aquarian age, I don't know what is.
Wow. Wow. That's what are the odds? What are the
What are the
odds that
odds? What are
what are
the
the odds that
odds?
your partner would be into the girls that you're into? Like how
I don't
fortunate?
know. It's like
Clearly.
it's because I'm walking the sacred path. It's because I'm walking the sacred path of service. It's just like, they aren't into it at first, and then I'm like, okay, well, do you want to take the bus instead? And then they're like immediately they start to love women. It's just like the thing is, like, this thing exists in all women. All women are inherently bisexual. They just have to have this the awakening happen to them, and the awakening can only happen through a man that's willing to sleep with all of her best friends.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely one of the more sacred teachings of the ancient schools that they keep hidden for good reason. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, it was in the Vedas, and it was like, it was kind of happened in that epic ballad in which, Ram and Sita were finally reunited. And the reason they got reunited was because Sita was able to understand that Ram, as the being this divine superior masculine, was actually doing a service to humanity by sowing his seed in as many women that he could. And that's really what they don't talk about this in the actual Bhagavad Gita, but I'm pretty sure that's how it went.
Hmm, hmm. So like, so in general, how, like, I know that some of the practices, they really honor women. So would you say that it sounds like a very an honoring practice for the divine feminine coming into balance with the divine masculine in this way?
Yeah, yeah, it really is. I mean, you know what? I couldn't think of a more incredible thing for a divine feminine to experience than her man wanting to impregnate all her friends. I mean, what bigger honor? And she can, just be surrendered and stay in this feminine flow. It's the most incredible. It's just like, you know, I mean, I don't really like to talk about my personal sexual life, but
Mm.
yeah, it's just when it's for rebalancing the Akashic records, it's just something I have to do. So yeah, she's there. I'm just very fortunate to have chosen this path of service to the feminine. I mean, I'm not really, and by feminine, by the divine feminine, I naturally mean only the fit young ones who are under 40 years old.
Yeah, they're truly the divine feminine. Everyone else is just
Yeah,
like women.
women. Yeah. I mean, the other ones are just kind of bringing the vibration down. And so that's why I tell them, it's just like, if you were, I mean, they're all into this thing of like, I got to have a husband and serve him. And I'm like, I don't know where you're getting all these crazy new age ideas from, because as far as I can remember, it was never really about the union of one man and woman raising a family. It was always just about pledging allegiance to the overlord, and just racking as much wealth that you could and not giving and sharing anything else with anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, everyone knows that's how it's all always been. Like it's never been about love. It's always just been about servitude.
Yeah, I mean, love is like, it's a tricky thing, and it's like salvation. It's like, why would I spend so much time and energy trying to cultivate something when I could just be on my phone and just have like any of my Instagram girls call me? It's like, why would I put so much practice into it? Just like, why would I put so much practice into having stillness and compassion and struggle with meditation when I could just pop some peyote and some mushrooms? It's like, wow.
Yes. Yeah. Why
Because
would you? Go ahead.
yeah, because this whole spiritual journey is really about bypassing any of the work. It's like really getting to the end destination as fast as possible. Because all this other
Yes.
stuff in the middle is just like, that's just taking up dead space that could be used for altars of me.
Yeah. Why would we walk the Bodhisattva path when we can just like take a DMT rocket? Like
Yeah,
those silly monks. They had no idea.
that's what I'm telling them. It's like, maybe that's why they're all bald, because they've just been lost all their intelligence with that. But I'm obviously not bald because of that. I'm bald because my testosterone is too high.
Way, way too high. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
So, so speaking of, the Bodhisattva path, like, what are your views on the psychedelic renaissance that's kind of happening right now? And then of course the white woke leaders like Terrence McKenna and Timothy Leary and Gabor Mate. Like, what do you think about, since you are the prophesied one? What do you think about all these guys kind of biting on your throat?
Yeah. I mean, I see, the thing is, like, I actually don't, this is where, when you've done the amount of work that I've done, I don't really see it as biting my flow, because as long as they're white and they're older, we're all kind of on the same spiritual journey. So it's more like allies. But and I'm just really honored to be part of this spiritual capitalism and psychedelic renaissance, because I mean, what better way to honor spirit and indigenous culture than by removing all the spiritual aspects of it and prostituting the sacred and pumping it out as chocolates for trust fund babies, and we're going to boutique festivals and pills for treatments in luxury clinics? I mean, can you think of any other way to honor the indigenous spirit?
I can't think of a better way to honor the indigenous spirit than a giant music festival. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean the only other thing that I could think that's more honoring of the spirit of the plants is to actually, and the indigenous people, is by making millions and giving nothing back to them. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the reason it's called the Renaissance, right? It's like when something that's been around for centuries as a part of a culture is instead credited to a single older white man instead. Renaissance.
Yeah, that's pretty close to what happened. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I just really commend these guys who are like these pioneers of society. Like these are the guys that are like, honestly, I think we should all just be in reverence to them because, you know, they're trying to, instead, you know, because yeah, it's like you could go out and start to fix all these broken social systems that perpetuate inequality and suppression, or you could just melt your face off with some DNT, do a few IG lives, and then launch a retreat center where people who are dying actually from isolation can now
White
finally
supremacy.
experience community. Yeah, by paying for $10,000 for doing a medicine ceremony that's built and operated by locals who could actually never afford to experience anything in there. And yeah, I know some people might call this slavery by paying them $20 a month, but as guardians of the land and all the money that we can extract from this land, we are really here to uplift the locals. Like uplift them right out of their home so that I can build a retreat center there and call it something Sanskrit. And so it's totally not neocolonialism because if you actually looked at the manifestation journal of these slaves, I mean servants, all the way from the very top of the, you know, all the way in Mexico and Guatemala and Costa Rica, every single local person's manifestation journal at the very top, like at the very top of the pyramid of their manifestation, they have being born as a worker for a person building a retreat center to help anchor in the frequency of the new earth reality where only rich white people have access to healing and creating more spiritual products. So yeah, it's right up top of the manifestation journal, along right next to clean water. And no, please don't thank me. I'm just a humble servant dedicated in the service of humanity by attaining Christ's defer Columbus consciousness and breaking
Mm.
free of this fractal world of illusions and Maya and finally becoming tuned into the other ultimate reality of stealing another culture and adding a sacred geometry logo on it and then running it through a sales funnel program, a network marketing deployment system, and then we just sacredly scale it to seven figures. Then we take this money and rightfully take back what is ours from the indigenous locals and set up a retreat center where other white people can come and learn how to heal by stealing their culture and offering indigenous plant medicine ceremonies that none of them are culturally, professionally, ethically, legally, or logically permitted to hold. And this is why we call it giving back. And for every gold and crystal pyramid tower and emerald altar of me that we erect, we build them a well.
Mm. Yeah, I was not about to thank you for any of that, but I want to thank you for that last vision that you just shared with me. That was very profound. I can imagine all these glowing statues of you around the country, really as around the world, as a testament to the benevolence that you're showing to all these indigenous cultures.
Yeah, it's really for them so that the and for the land, so the land can actually access some healing through the rays that are emanating from the altars of myself. We also built one in we built them around all like around the ruins in Tulum so that the pyramids could receive my frequencies, and we built them in sacred sites all over the world.
Wow, that's a lot of enlightenment you're sharing with a lot of less fortunate people that don't have
It's
access
just
to the wisdom.
yeah, it's just that when you're the source, it just comes through. It doesn't stop. It's like it just comes through. I just keep hearing all these voices in my head and they just come through, and I just think that it's the least that I can do.
Yeah, it's always very listening to the voices in our head is always the surest sign that we're on the bodhisattva path and really on the way to integrating the oneness into the duality.
Hmm.
So do you ever worry though, with all these things that you're doing, this grand vision that you want to bring about on the planet, do you ever worry that there's or wonder that there's more to life than manifesting?
Good one, Will. Good one.
Yeah.
Of course, there's more to life than manifesting more bougie beige things and exotic holidays and more model girlfriends. I mean, there's also manifesting more dream clients, more peak experiences, more sold out courses, more goddesses to have sacred, cosmic, sensual, casual, divine union one night stands with. It's like the American dream for woke white people. But for me, I'm all about the service and building a world renowned personal brand from which to funnel a never ending stream of products and spiritual services affordable only by the elite. I mean, just this last week, I had this powerful realization during my Wachuma waffles about being connected to all of humanity. And then I just woke up and I fired the entire Mid-Eastern part of our business.
Mm, that's very that's very namaste of you.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm gonna stay away
Yeah.
from me.
This has been an incredibly enlightening experience for me. I really feel so many different complicated emotions, but it's definitely happened. It's definitely happened, and so I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me. And so, but I just one last question: like, what can all your friends and all the bisexual goddesses expect to see from you next?
Yeah, that's oh man, there's so much going on in this path of ascension. It's like so we're about to launch my new mushroom blend because why sit and have to struggle with a still mind and depression caused by alienation and isolation and trying to dissolve all your karmic patterns for a lifetime when you could just pop a pill and drink a vine and meet God and then become
Yeah.
God in less than 12 minutes, right? And then, like it says in verse 416 of Aubrey, God is in the land. So we're taking over more land in Lake Atitlan and Nosara to build more retreat centers where people can experience oneness while they ignore the staff.
Mm.
Then we're doing a mastermind on Necker with the brand. And of course, doing a new season of my super powerful 20K personal transformation program, Rich for Service. And then my queen of the week, Milana, and I are hosting our own transformational. I'm super excited about this one. We're hosting our own transformational festival called Acacia. It's like a convergence of all the leaders of light workers who can afford $5,000 for a ticket. It's kind of like Summit meets Bernie Madoff in the Hamptons on peyote. And finally, like in my last DeFi Changa journey, I had the sacred vision of acquisition strategies, kind of like how Moses had. So what we're doing is we're building an ark, like a Noah's ark, and we have a goddess from every nationality come onto it, and then the brand and I set sail for Atlantis to become the rightful rulers and commanders of Middle Earth. So yeah, lots going on this year.
Wow, that actually reminds me of, you mentioned a festival. I just have another question, if that's okay.
Yeah,
Just curious about some of the festival practices. So,
yeah.
will you be having, once again, will you be having men bow down at the feet of women? Like, will that be part of what you're doing again this year?
I mean, yeah, it's like it's to create these staged moments instead of actually feeling what's there. And I think it's just the more we can create these performative moments, the more society has a chance of healing, rather than actually addressing the challenges that occur. So yeah, it's like when we can create these staged and like everyone can dress as a goddess, and we can just it's really about like when we were back at children and we used to wear these costumes, but now we're in our 40s and we still wear these costumes. It's really about yeah, not growing up ever and staging all these incredible peak moments and people holding their wombs and crying and yeah, it's yeah, there'll be lots of really really powerful moments that are going to be completely surrendered into.
Yeah, it's very powerful to know the ways that we can use Instagram, to create social engineering programs and really tell people what to think. It's a very powerful tool for that.
I mean, yeah, because it's like if they were already enlightened, they would know what to think. But since they don't, they're looking for a real leader. It's like we and you, I imagine, are the same. It's like, people look up to you to really become like when they don't aren't able to think for themselves. And it's like people like us that are actually here to tell them what to do and really use half truths and bits and pieces of scientific evidence to really support our own view.
Yeah, yeah, especially the bits and pieces of scientific evidence that almost begin to sound credible when you put them together and you talk fast enough. That is the
Yeah.
best way to tell people how to think.
Because yeah, because like as long as you can put a graph in there, who really cares? Because the people are already committed to their point of view, so they're obviously not even going to read the graph. So it doesn't really matter. I think it's really about, yeah, it's just showing up in this in these positions of leadership, being the voice that's louder than all the other voices, having your pectorals be more defined, because these people, they really need this leadership whether or not they know it. And yeah, this is kind of why we're here. This is why we're here making the millions. I mean, I hope you're making millions, because I certainly am.
Oh yeah, yeah, very, very, very much so. So yeah, I
I
mean,
mean, I
it's
can
it's
tell by
it's
your aura, your face is kind of glowing,
mm,
which would obviously have me, and your house looks beautiful, which would obviously have me know that you are on the correct spiritual path, because you look amazing, you don't have any wrinkles, you've got beautiful lighting, so obviously you're close to God.
yeah. I find that production values are really the clearest way to tell whether someone's enlightened or not.
Yeah, because like, you know, it's like if you just hire the best teams and have the best lighting, I mean, who cares if you've actually, and you say that you've done the work? Like, no one,
Yeah, yeah.
no one, yeah, it's like, have you, we've been doing the work. We've been doing the work. It's just like the works consisted of, like, finding all the right production, finding the right camera angles, finding the right intonations. It's just like, this is the deep work that most people aren't willing to do. It's like the shadow work.
Yeah, most people aren't really willing to put in the work to find like where the light is casting the shadow on your face so that really accentuates,
Yeah.
your overall beautiful appearance because,
Mhm.
clearly the more handsome someone is, the more they should be listened to about basically everything.
Yeah, because it's like the more handsome you are, the more bigger your muscles are, and like the more
Yes.
you talk in a slower voice, and with have malas, it just really adds to this air of authority that I have, or sorry, that other people have. My authority comes from my actual presence, but yeah, it's really just about using my privilege. I mean, my position and my past as a way to use authority and to be the authority.
Yeah, and the financial success that you've had is the proof that you're right. I mean, obviously.
I mean, yeah, it's like, how else do you know a coach is successful or like is on the right path? Because you see them, you see that they're getting over 200 likes per post, and they're always in a tropical location, and they're around beautiful people, and like obviously none of this is staged. It's
No.
clear as that, because they are living a peak state life all the time in tropical places, and it's got nothing to do with the fact that they're chasing these things, and nothing to do with the fact that they're afraid of commitment, or can't hold relationships or any of that. It's really because the more the more followers you have, I find the more you sound authoritative, the bigger your pectorals are, the more crystals you wear, the more clearly you are aligned with God and oneness. And the best way to show your alignment with oneness is to have more houses and more villas that I take photos from.
Yes, it's definitely when you look at the stuff that someone has, that's really how you evaluate the quality of their character and the brilliance of their ideas. Like, wow, that guy has a nice car. He must be
Yeah,
completely right. Or he has all the crystals
it's all
around
the
him and
crystals.
he talks so slowly. He
Yeah,
must be really intelligent.
that's it. It's like having a British accent, but a spiritual version of it.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well, Peter, this has definitely been an enlightening experience. It has definitely shifted my perspective on lots of different things.
Mm.
I've learned a lot of things that I can't wait to forget. And so I'm just wondering, where would you like to send people to find out more about you and what you do?
Thank you for having me here. Well, it's been really enlightening for you, I can tell.
Mm,
I would just ask, those the brothers, to they'll find it in their heart that if they want to join the sacred brotherhood of men, who are the becoming the leaders of the new earth paradigm for woke white people, they can find out about me on my upcoming program. We've got a few seats left to really take men through these initiation journeys that their fathers were never able to give them. It's called Rich for Service. You have to make at least 8 figures before we consider your application, but you can find me over there. I'll also be doing other acts of service like just a free masterclass here and there. But yeah, I'm excited for other brothers to join me, but only the brothers that are making seven figures.
Yeah, because they're the ones that have proved their worth as human beings.
I mean, there's that, but it's just that the space that I hold. It's like it's just so powerful. Like you can't have these, guys who have jobs and relationships and wives. It's not for that. It's just this elite space that I'm holding, and we just don't have space for that kind of space. If you know what I mean.
Exactly. I know exactly what you mean. Well, thank you, Peter, and I'm sure that many men will sign up for that because it obviously describes an enormous contingent of men who are seeking, really bad information that's masquerading as spirituality.
Well, that yeah, it's that, but it's also the fact that these men they kind of grew up in these environments where their father was struggling with some sort of issue, like either he was not present, or either if he was present, he was not emotionally present and didn't give them the kind of natural rites of passages that we used to have. So because these men have these gaping voids of a big brother and an elder father figure, these men are actually on the path of making themselves better. So they look towards, where can I find this role model? And lo and behold, it's Peter Las Plantas.
Mm. Namaste, Pachamama to that.
Namaste, Pachamama.
Well, thank you, Peter, and may you have a wonderful illusion of a day and a continued blessed eternity.
Thank you, brother. You as well. Aho.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching that interview. As you've probably, hopefully guessed, it was satire. Peter Las Plantas is not a real person. None of that was serious. That was a comedy bit that my guest and I worked on to make a point. My guest's real name is Ali Sardar, and he's a comedian, artist, and fashion designer who I discovered on Instagram Reels through his merciless mocking of New Age influencers, which hopefully you picked up on in the skit. I find Ali's comedy refreshing because he's a court jester in a palace that desperately needs it. He uses his sharp mind and razor wit to point out, hey everyone, this is kinda messed up. And in this genuine part of the conversation, Ali and I discussed his upbringing and immigration from Pakistan at age 19, his journey of self-discovery through art, the limits of materialism, the importance of having a conscience, the nature of good and evil, and finally, exploring aloneness and relational healing through comedy. If you enjoy the Renaissance of Men podcast, still, thank you. Please help the podcast grow by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Plus, leave a comment down below letting us know what you thought of both interviews. And a quick note to the audiences who'll be watching. As you'll hear, Ali and I have a couple meaningful and friendly worldview differences. For my Christian audience, please listen for the courage that Ali is showing to question his beliefs and identity and not to stop. That is my story. It's why I'm here. And for audiences whose faith aligns with Ali's, you'll hear me mention that I was introduced to Christ at a Burning Man camp in 2015. If you'd like to know more about that story, you can find a link to the 2-year anniversary podcast with that camp down below in the show notes. I invite you to watch the YouTube video and judge through their words if there's more to the Christian faith than the Christian faith is sometimes good at showing. And I pray that my words help model that for you as well. And please welcome this week's guest on the podcast, the man behind Peter Las Plantas, Tantric Dave, and countless other characters, poking smart fun at spiritual self-seriousness, Ali Sardar. Ali, welcome to the podcast, man.
Yay! I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
That was a lot of fun. That little dialogue we had. Thank you for joining me in that.
Yeah, thank you for playing along with me. I know there was times where it was hard, from both sides. It was hard. I think I cracked up a couple of times as well. So it's just really fun when people want to partake in silliness and also just reflection of ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know how I first stumbled across her Instagram page. Who knows where reels come from or whatever. And I was laughing so much with you just ridiculing this whole new age guru influencer kind of world.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, as my listeners know, I spent a long time in that world. And so to see it, it's like,
Uh-huh.
okay, this guy sees it and knows exactly how to poke holes in it. So I've appreciated what you do for a while.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I've been very lucky with I tried to, so a lot of people don't know this about me is that I was actually a life coach when I started this as
Okay.
well. So yeah, so that's, I've kind of taken that route. And I, as much as I, might make fun of things, and we'll get into this a little bit deeper.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
as much as I make fun of life coaches and whatnot, it's really such a fucking difficult thing to do. Apologies. It's just
That's
such
okay.
a difficult. It's really really difficult, and
Hmm.
for people, I really commend people that are able to do it. And my judgments of what they're doing and all those other things aside, just the act of being able to do it, it's so difficult that I quit. That I was like, I can't do this. This is really difficult. So yeah, I just want to acknowledge that. And I think this is also what kind of happens, is that people think that just because I'm making fun of something, that there's something wrong or there's something bad, but that's not always the case. And we'll
Right.
talk a little bit more about this as we get into it. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I look at the things you do, and I see reflected in it a lot of the guys who have not great intentions. Like for example, the way what I always say is like this is not a market for me; it's a ministry, and I can tell
Mm,
when guys use it as a market. Like you can tell, you learn to see. Maybe you buy something even, and you discover the care and attention to detail. Like, are you really in it to help people, or
mm,
are you in it for the money? And you get a sense of that over time. So I've actually thought that in everything that you've done, you draw a really clear line between the people who are properly motivated and the
yeah.
ones who aren't. That's how I've always felt.
Well, that's great. I hope that it comes across to people like that. But what I've also realized in this is that it's there's a couple of layers and veils to this that people don't know about what I'm doing yet, and it's not for me to disclose it just yet.
Hmm.
But one of the things, since you've touched upon it, is that what I've also realized is that in this time and age, that it's I mean, this has kind of always been the case, is that looks are so deceiving. Like, you never
Hmm.
know what a person is and how, uh, you know and now in this age, when people can look a certain way and have all the right verbiage, and the lingo and the dress and the lifestyle, uh, it's so difficult to tell. And some of my most informative moments have been with people that I'm like, oh man, this person clearly looks the part, and then I've gotten a chance to speak to them. I'm like, holy shit, this person is actually uh, you know they are actually on the path of enlightenment, and they are actually really incredible people. But it's just so hard to tell, and that's one of the things
Yeah.
that I like to remind myself, and also to people, is just like, just because certain things look a certain way, whether that's whatever side that falls on, I try not to use good or bad, but whatever side that falls on, is like, we don't really know. And what I'm excited about is, I think, is this is one of the layers behind the satire, is that eventually, as a society, we'll start to come into these places of of knowing that is beyond the words. It's like we'll start to have this recognition, because ultimately all the words are going to fall away. Everyone is going to start to know the appearance and everything, which is kind of already happening. Like, people are
Mm.
becoming smart to it, and they're going to start to
Yeah.
have this other layer of discernment of what's actually authentic. So that's an exciting place.
Yeah, I think that there are going to be enough influencers who blow up on the launch pad, so to speak, that people will begin to be a bit more discerning with what they hear and what they listen to and
Yeah,
what they choose to believe. It's a really necessary part because I don't know. My buddy Andre from Solioli from Andre and Soli posted the other day that we're not really as a species used to being exposed to that many opinions on a daily
yeah.
basis. Like we're not really made for it. And I thought that was a really good observation.
Uh-huh. It is a really good observation. I think it's going to be really exciting what comes in. It's also, while we're on this topic, it's also, it's also really difficult. People don't realize that there are parts of me that struggle with this, because there's, imagine if a person just looks a certain way, but they are actually on the quote unquote side of good and they really mean it. It's just like, it's so difficult for them. So it's also really challenging for me, is because I try not to, put someone down, and finding that line between, speaking to something and putting people down. It's just so difficult, and I try to have compassion for people on the other side of it, because everyone's getting painted with a single stroke, as it happens with most things, when there's the traumatic response, and now every life coach is this and every business coach is this. And I think
Mm,
as part of that discernment that I was speaking about earlier, where we're going to start to tune into awareness that is beyond beyond the sight and the sound of how people convey themselves, is also going to be this understanding and this deeper sense of compassion. So it's a really exciting time for all of us.
mhm. Yeah, the development of that discernment. Go ahead.
And we have to go through this kind of period where there's this really strong, as has been the case with most movements, and one of which I'm really excited to talk to you about, because I've seen a lot on your Instagram about, is like we have to go through these stages of, like, revolting against every coach is bad and everything is this and everything is that, to coming to that fine line. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting journey, and I just wish that we can, I think whatever's going to, however it's going to go, it's going to really result in our evolution. But I just think, I hope that everyone can just be gentle with each other and just realize that there's so much pain in these places, so much. And it's really interesting when I start to do this satire, it's also really interesting because people, when they speak, generally as humans, when we speak, we're speaking from our point of view. And when I'm doing the satire, is that people, and it's really, really fascinating to see that, is that Ricky Gervais is such an incredible comedian. Have you heard of him?
Of course,
He's the
yeah.
guy. Yeah. So one of the things that he says is like, and I find it the best way to be really incredible, is that, he says that I'll do anything for the joke. He's like, if the joke, he's like, what's the most funniest thing that I could say? And for that, I'll be an extremist. I'll be left wing. I'll be pro feminist. I'll be, anti feminist. So that's the kind of lens that I'm coming at it from. I'm just like, what's the most ridiculous thing that I can say, and most extreme thing that I can say? And it's been really, really interesting. When I say these things, people believe that it's my opinion. For the most part, some of them, they can tell that I'm just
Sure.
exaggerating things. But it's so funny that when I'm not, when we, I'll speak for myself, when I'm not tied to my view and I'm in no way trying to defend it. I'm not, like most people, they will say something and that's their view and they're going to defend it. When I'm not, I can actually sit back and observe the reactions that people have, and I get to know so much about people by the way that they respond. And I'm like, wow, that's
Mhm.
really interesting to hear that you've had these painful experiences with, life coaches, or with men, or with sex, or with religion, and all these things. So it's really, really fascinating to see what people are going through. And yeah.
Yeah, that's something I've observed as well. Like there's almost like we as a society need satire more than ever, probably
Hmm.
because everyone's so hung up on their own experience that they can't really see past it, and satire kind of holds up the
Yeah.
mirror, and people can react all kinds of ways to jokes that are not about them, right? But they
Yeah.
take it personally.
Yeah, that's kind of how satire had always been around. And a lot of people look at it, they're like, oh, do you want to do stand up or do you want to do comedy? And I'm like, no, not exactly, because one, it's quite scary, but also it's just like I wanted to have a deeper meaning for
Hmm.
myself, and it's really this. It's like we get a chance to observe ourselves and observe society. It's a commentary on society, and this is the other layer that I was speaking to, is that people see the front side of it, which is like, oh, you're making fun of a life coach, or a goddess, or a tech bro. But what people will start to eventually, once they've gone through the layers of their own pain, which might take however long it takes, I think people are going to start to ask different questions, and that's what I'm excited for. Like questions like, why we're talking about coaches selling all these always trying to sell and always trying to market and having these master classes and building funnels. I think an interesting question is, why are these people behaving the way that they are? They're not inherently bad. No one's inherently bad.
Yeah.
What are the forces that are operating on their psyche? What are the kind of world that we're living in that causes people to behave this way? And I think that's when we're going to start to get into some interesting places. Because right now we're still in the place of like, haha, they're this, they're that, I'm this, I'm that. But it's really, it's not for me to guide the course of this. People will do it in their own way. And it's just really fascinating to see what's going to happen when we start to ask these deeper questions, like, why are women being this way, or men being this way, or business being this way? What's causing people to have that? And then we're going to start to have some really, really incredible breakthroughs, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, I want to acknowledge that you and I have some worldview differences. I think that's important. I think that's important to
Yeah.
share. And I have some, and we can get into that, maybe a bit later. But I have some, I found some answers to these questions that maybe we can get into. But in a minute.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
first, I want to hear one of the things that I remember from my time in that I guess you might say the New Age world, if we can call it that, just for shorthand, is
Hmm.
a real resistance to critical observations about bad behavior, right? Like
Hmm.
it's like New Age and satire don't really go well together, right?
Hmm.
It tends to take itself very very seriously, and
Hmm.
so like I'm curious how how you developed the instinct and the courage to begin satirizing in general, because
Hmm.
obviously there's a ton of material, but
Hmm.
it's almost like, am I going to really do this? Like, what was the process like of developing your characters and being like, oh wow, I guess I'm going to actually
Yeah.
do this?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. It's been really interesting. So people, so I've been writing jokes and being funny since ever as long as I can remember. One of the most fondest memories I have in my childhood is that my I have two elder brothers. I grew up in Pakistan.
Mm,
My I have an elder brother and a younger brother, and the three of us would be in the room, and basically, I would say this is at least months, if not years, realistically, that we would just crack jokes all night
mm,
long, and it was just like this innocence. So I've always kind of been lucky to have that sort of cutting. It's always been, there's been a cutting element to it, and that led to me being a bully for a while as well, and being
mm,
bullied. But I've always had that way of just observing things and just saying it. And both my brothers are funny, but I quickly learned that it was, and people always think they're like, oh, oh, you're funny. That's just like this coping mechanism that you have, and I'm like, maybe, or maybe you're just so fucking boring that I have to bring some levity to it. And I think that's what was happening with the comedy and like the spiritual places where I would go into these. I used to live in Tulum for a few years, and it's not just like a Tulum thing, but I was just, I was like, holy hell, these people are really like going in on it and in on it. And I was
yeah,
like, wow, where's the celebration and the laughing at oneself and like the
right.
the the fun? It was just so serious, and people are like so serious about their shadow work and their path and their this and this. And I'm like, that's great, but it's also another layer of ego that we can lose ourselves in because it just sounds or feels better. So when I first started doing the jokes, so I've been writing jokes since many, I would say at least like 15 years. I've been writing jokes and sharing them quite regularly. Uh, but the first time I started to do the satire thing was probably about 6 years ago, and it was not received well. People were just like, "Oh,
Mm,
you're an idiot." Like, I don't know, lots of people. I mean, people still unfollow me and unfriend me and whatnot. Uh,
wow.
yeah, but I mean, we'll get to that part. By and large, what I hear is positive feedback, but I'm sure there's people who have challenges with it. But yeah, the first time I started it, it was really negative feedback from a lot of people, and lots of people were like, oh, you're an asshole, this and that. And I was like, it was really difficult doing that because again, I see the side of it. It's easy to throw a joke, but to handle it is sometimes not really the easiest thing. And it's
Yeah,
it kind of also, and it reminds me to have compassion for the other side of it, because when this happens, we have these biological, these primal fears of being cut out from the tribe, and all these things get activated, and you're being picked on, or people have experiences of being bullied. And it's such a difficult space to be in, and I just wish that people know that, if I do, it's such a difficult place to choose to be, and I'm willingly choosing this, that I'm like, oh man, like I don't want to hurt people, but this is happening and I want to express it. And it's so complex, it's so complex. And I think what happened I stopped doing it. I was just like, no, I also didn't have, the means to focus on it.
mm,
And fast forward 6 years, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this, because I was like, what do I really want to do in life, and what are the things that bring me the most joy, and where do some of my gifts lie? And this was one of them. There's a few others that I'm excited to for the world, for me to experience with the world when the time is right. But so I brought it up again. This was like maybe 2 years ago, and that's when it was a completely different response. People were like,
mm,
I think what had happened was, when I started it, people weren't experiencing the other side of it, but when I started doing it again this last time, like 2 years ago, people had started to see the bullshit all around themselves and had started to experience it. So they were much more open to it. And I think it was just, it was kind of getting undeniable to a point. So people were just really welcoming it. So it happened. I think the timing of it was really incredible, but it's still extremely challenging because, I'm not doing this under an alias. It's under my name, and people
Hmm.
think it's my views. And it's also, it's really, it's one thing to be a writer, and that's what my thing was before. It was like I'm behind the screen, I'm just writing it, it's a lot easier. But now, leaning into performing it and sharing it, it's really difficult part of it to be like, wow, like I'm saying something that I know is going to hurt people, uh but still finding that place of like, but this is authentic and it's going to do something, and like not caring. It's really, really, it's a crazy journey.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely relate to some of the characters that you did a series, a couple of reels, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, where you
Mhm.
spilled some milk and you showed the different characters,
Yeah.
and that was great because I could relate to having been some of those characters. But there's a
Mhm.
component where it's like you're absolutely right, like the joy drains out of it. The joy drains out of that world very quickly. It becomes very serious. It becomes very,
Mhm.
it becomes almost suffocating. And it's like, guys, like we're still human beings here,
Mhm.
and we all have to be able to laugh at ourselves. And like
Mhm.
people will gladly go to a comedy, like a comedy routine, as you mentioned, you're a performer. They'll go to a comedy club and they'll laugh, or they'll heckle, and then they'll get made fun of by the comedian, and then they'll laugh at themselves. But somehow when they see themselves reflected in a reel or a comedy bit online, it cuts a little too
Yeah.
close. It's like maybe there's actually something to look at there, right?
And I think this is also one of those trademarks of what I consider people to be. Uh, I actually can trust people who can laugh at themselves, because I'm like, I know you're not
Yeah.
perfect, and so if you can laugh at yourself, and you can laugh at the things that you're a part of, because the thing is like, hey man, there's one, which is the thing that I was saying earlier, is just like, it's so interesting. A person, and I've been in this situation. Let's take a thing that I have probably said. I know I've said to women, and they're one of the characters that I have is Tantric Dave, who's like this, super new age,
Yeah.
polyamorous, really kind of toxic guy. But the truth is, and it's really, really, really fascinating. There's a lot of things that he said that I have said,
Yeah.
and I've looked at it, and this is such an incredible internal healing that happens with this whole. A lot of it's the healing that's happening with people. First of all, even before the healing, it's entertainment. It's fun, and that alone is really
Yeah.
important. We don't always have to have this higher. I try not to have like this higher meaning and deeper thing to it. Sometimes things are just silly and they're funny. And I started to write these. Basically, I wrote down some of the things that I said to a woman. There's this one sketch that I made of what a new age date looks like, which was basically everything that I did on a date. And I was like, wow, this is really ridiculous. It's really, really funny. So it's really, I think it just shows that when people can look at these things about themselves, or at least be open to it, I feel that I can trust them more. And I'm like, okay, like you
Hmm.
see it, it's fine. And the thing is, because, like we were saying earlier, is like the words, all those are going to start to lose meaning, very soon, if they haven't already lost it. And so what's going to be left? And when we can, it's such an important place to be able to observe and reflect in ourselves, and really come to the essence uh, of why we're doing what we're doing. So yeah.
That's a great way of thinking about it. Like, why are you, individual? Why are you engaged in this world? Like
Yeah.
Tantric Dave. That's
Yeah.
the thing that's so entertaining about him. He's just obviously so greasy and so using euphemisms and very clearly like in this gross way trying to seduce somebody and making it sound all enlightened, and it's just like, ugh. It's like I
And that,
recognize those words.
yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, it's so wild, because I've actually said these words to women, and I've like, one of the things would be like, oh, I would say just like, oh, I can tell that you feel more surrendered by my masculine presence, and that just sounds absolutely fucking ridiculous. However, and you can see both sides of this, right? Like, I've seen people just say this. However, I've also been around a man and be like, wow, I feel incredible. I don't know about you, what it's like, but like, when I come into space and there's men, that are a certain size or have a certain physique, I immediately feel there's a biological part of me that's like, or when I hug a man, I'm like, yes. It's like these things happen. So So it's so interesting, like how can something, and this is like, it's our brains, I think, have an opportunity to evolve in this way. It's like, can something be true but also wrong, but also silly, but also sacred, and also divine,
Hmm.
but also messy, because life is all of it. And I think the more that we can start to hold these diverse and diverging viewpoints and beliefs together, I think we are going to become more, at least, I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily, I mean, even if we don't become more evolved, we're definitely going to become more understanding of other people. So it's really, really fascinating what's happening with all of this, and a lot of it's just me just saying the things that I've said, and when I say it, people think it's a joke, but I've actually experienced the other side of it. I've actually experienced women, a lot of people don't know this about me, but I'm also I'm a somatic therapist, and I work with, I have a separate technique with men and a separate technique with women. And lo and behold, the technique with women is, there's a tantra component to it. And
Hmm.
it's just so wild. And even being in that space, it's been mostly incredible for women, but there have been instances where I've made mistakes. And so it's like, how do we
Hmm.
reconcile all these deep aspects of ourselves, of and moving beyond this right and wrong? It's really fascinating journey we're on.
Well, I can't go with you there on moving beyond right and wrong, because that was actually one of the things that led me to where I'm at now. But I
Uh-huh.
think the thing that's important about what you do is that you point out the hypocrisies, and you point
Mhm.
out the exploitation. And I think
Mhm.
that's the part that I connected with. Like, there's obviously a lot
Mhm.
of silliness, and there's obviously a lot of goofiness, and obviously just a lot of like buzzwords. Like,
Mhm.
you capture the buzzwords brilliantly, and especially where things start to blend between the spiritual and the commercial.
Mhm.
And I think as people hear, as they get into as they listen through the satire piece we did earlier, that
Mhm.
it's really the exploitation aspects of it that's really troubling. That there are people
Mhm.
who come in and use the spiritual language to
Mhm.
seduce people out of money or out of their clothes, so to speak.
Mhm.
And that's the part where there is not enough discernment and scrutiny brought to it, right? And that's what I like about what you
Mhm.
do is that you highlight that, like, it is absolutely not all love and light.
Yeah. You know what? Even with that, it's like, it's really interesting because a lot of these are disappointments that I've had with myself, that I've woken up and I'm
Hmm.
like, wait, am I doing this? Wait, am I exploiting these people? Am I actually doing what's,
Hmm.
and it's like my own disappointments that I've had with my own behavior, that I'm so frustrated with myself, or I judge myself, or areas that I feel guilty. And I just like, I feel this is my way to deal with this emotion. I just like put it there. And I'm like, this is so nasty, something that I've done, that I will just put it in and people will laugh at it. And it's just, it's really, really a crazy journey to go through all of this and to be able to see it. And it's just so difficult, man. Like, this has also been the other incredible part of it, is like, for myself, is like seeing myself make these mistakes, and knowing, and this has been one of the most incredible parts, and knowing that I'm a good person, like genuinely I'm a good person. And if I can make these mistakes, what if other people are also making these mistakes? What if they're not evil? What if they're not corrupt? What if they're not out there to get the money? Like, what else is happening there? What else is possible? And I find that to lead to some interesting areas.
I mean, I think if we can get philosophical for a second, I think the notion of like, well, what does it even mean to be a good person or a bad person?
Mhm.
You've mentioned for yourself that you've made these mistakes. You've said some of the things that Tantric Dave says. You've crossed your conscience even, and it's troubled you. And
Mhm.
does that mean that there's a significant difference between you and the people who are just like leaning into it? Like, what's the nature of the difference there, right? Because you've done things that you're
Yeah.
not proud of that trouble you, and like,
Yeah.
so are they. So, I mean, are any of us really good people?
That's really fascinating, that I start to think, is like, so is anyone really a bad person? Like, what does that even mean?
Well, I think we can say that some people really are, though. Harvey
I mean,
Weinstein is not a good. Jeffrey Epstein is not a good dude.
there's things that people do. It depends on what level and layer that you look at it, and where you're at within your own, within that experience of it. I think so, but like, if you extract it far enough, and this, it starts to get a little new age there, but I
Hmm.
think it's easier to compare it with people that are in a similar, in a similar playing field. I don't want to comment on other people, but yeah, it's just that seeing that self reflection, there's been the two sides of it. It's like when I've made a mistake and people have been kind with me, that's been incredibly transformative.
Hmm.
A lot of it has been with women. A lot of the mistakes have happened with women, and women have been really amazing and understanding with me, and even people in general. And then doing that for myself and being like, whoa, like, if I am not, let's not, if I'm not this, all these things that I project onto people, that this person is, they're manipulative, that they're just about the money, that they're just about this, that they're, all these negative attributes that I may generate towards them. When I start to see myself behave in those ways, it's like, oh shit, like, can I have forgiveness for myself? And is it something that even needs to be forgiven? Like, who's saying that this is good, this is bad? So it's a bit of a trip, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been down all these roads. So
Yeah.
let's separate a couple of things first. So let's
Please.
separate out someone who's on the public stage, because I
Hmm.
think once you put yourself out on a public stage as a public figure, the rules change. So if you put
Yeah.
yourself up there as an influencer, you step into the arena,
Hmm.
everything except for your personal life is fair game. But if you make your
Hmm.
personal life then part of your story or whatever, then your
Yeah.
personal life becomes fair game. To the point at which it's part of your angle or whatever, that's how then it's
Yeah.
fair. So so for example, like some of the character that we put together, Peter Las Plantas,
That you
which is
named.
thank you. Yes, thank you. That was I
Yeah.
was riffing off of some of the ideas that you had.
Yeah.
So like that's sort of a conglomeration of a lot of like public figures who I don't really feel the need to name, but I think people can
Uh-huh.
think of some ideas. Those
Uh-huh.
public figures, I think it's okay to ridicule them because they've put themselves out there, right? There's
Uh-huh.
something different between that versus like satirizing someone in everyday life who hasn't put themselves out there in that way. So
Uh-huh.
just to
Uh-huh.
draw, like we're not going
Yeah.
after everyday average people. We're satirizing like high level people
Uh-huh.
that, as the Brits say,
Uh-huh.
need to have the piss taken out of them, right? That's how the Brits say it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a different set of rules there, I think, for satire.
Hmm. Hmm. I agree.
Yeah. So versus sort of the other level of things we're talking about, like the decisions that everyday average people make in their lives. Like, are we are we really? What does it mean to be a good person? What does it mean to be a bad person? Right?
Uh-huh.
Like what is, given that we all make mistakes, we all hurt ourselves, we all hurt each other, and this seems to be a lifelong condition, right?
Uh-huh.
Can any like in a way that we can't really change, can any of us really ever said to be good people when we do wrong things, sometimes even with bad intentions, even despite ourselves? Like, I
Yeah.
know I shouldn't do this, and I did it anyway again.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's
So I guess my go ahead.
I'm curious. I'm curious to, before you get into your question. I'm curious to also know how you look at it. This this good person and not.
Mm. I mean, I think what people mean when they say I'm a good person means like I'm not a serial killer. I'm not someone who actively exploits someone for pleasure, right? Because there are people
Hmm.
in the world, we might call them psychopaths, right? In a
Hmm.
literal sense.
Hmm.
They genuinely enjoy hurting people because they get pleasure from it, and they don't do it out of a sense of weakness. They do it out of malice. I think that's
Hmm.
someone that we would agree be called a bad person, right, in a
Okay.
genuine sense, and may
Okay.
none of us ever meet someone like that. But when
I mean,
we say that,
other than seeing them control all of our society, but yeah, I hope we never meet them.
amen, amen, brother, exactly, exactly. So you see it, right? So there is, at the very highest level, there are people who are doing malicious things for either profit or for pleasure, right?
Hmm.
Maybe like the Joker archetype, right? In from
Hmm.
the Dark Knight Rises, like some men just want to watch the world burn. Like he doesn't care about
Hmm.
money. He just wants to make
Hmm.
people suffer and enjoy it, right? There, that's a kind of person.
Hmm.
So, but what when you and I would be talking about, am I a good person or a bad person? Like I think what we mean by that is we're not a wicked person. We're not a malicious person,
Hmm.
and yet we still do things wrong all the time. We're petty,
Hmm.
we're judgmental, we're short,
Hmm.
we're critical,
Hmm.
you know, even
Hmm.
despite ourselves. If that's
Hmm.
the case though, in the literal sense, are we still good people? We're not. That doesn't mean we're wicked people, but can we still say we're
Hmm.
good people if we still hurt ourselves and others in moments of weakness?
Hmm. That's a really fascinating question that I'm observing and contemplating as well. It's like, what does that look like, and how much are these are just like these primitive responses to things, and how much of this is part of my conditioning and how much of this is part of my personality.
Mm.
It's so nuanced, man. Like when you get into these spaces, it's just like, wow, what really, where does all of this come from? And at some point, what I'm trying to cultivate right now is to like kind of go beyond all of it, because it can become such a head trip, and to just see all of these happening. And it's interesting to find that space in between where you're observing, reflecting, but also knowing at the same time that there's more to it than just this. There's more to it than what, this physical level of reality and your behaviors and your attitudes and your thoughts. So trying to merge both those sides of it is really interesting, because we can. This is what happens a lot in this, what I see in the personal development world, is that we get so fixated on this individual, especially a lot in the Western side of it, because it can become such an individualized, like it becomes my healing journey, my truth, my
Yeah.
transformation, my visions, and it can become such an individualized, egocentric perspective. And I don't mean egocentric in a bad way, but just the egocentric in the sense
Hmm.
that the separate I, that we all have, that I'm always thinking about. Um, so it's really interesting to bring these areas of awareness into it, and to know that ultimately, you could go down these rabbit holes and open up like can of misery and trauma and all of those things, and not to say that there's no value in it, but at some point you also have to cultivate a higher, I wouldn't necessarily call it a higher perspective, but a different perspective that has a more holistic view of the whole thing, and knowing that whatever, you are bigger than the things that you believe and the things that you do in your past. There's more to it than that.
Yeah, well said. That was definitely it does ultimately the healing path, quote unquote, can become very narcissistic, where it's like,
Uh-huh.
oh, I did something wrong again. Let me go do another healing thing. Let me go do another, and then you
Yeah.
just kind of end up disappearing into your own navel of endless trauma and memories that you kind of can dig out of yourself. Like, oh, it must be because of this thing from the past or
Yeah.
this thing from the past. But
Yeah.
it's a never ending well. It's a never,
It's a
and when you
never
bring
ending
in like,
one.
yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people get really lost in that, particularly with ayahuasca. That's like,
Hmm.
from the circles that I've navigated through, there were people that showed up like every month for another medicine journey, another 3 medicine journeys. It's like, bro, like, what do you like? You should be able to make progress. Like, you don't need to be here. You're doing okay. But they begin relying on it
Hmm.
because they think they get addicted to doing the work, and then they disappear
Hmm.
into it.
hmm I'm really fascinated to learn a little bit about that. I just want to also make a point. Is like I
Yeah.
I was living in Bali, and I'm going to make a sketch. I had moved to Bali, and I'm making a sketch about this one. It was like, it's so amazing. You see all these expats, including myself, coming in there, and they're doing all these ceremonies and these rituals, and these
Mm,
local people are just sitting there, and I'm like, wow,
yeah.
some of the most incredible transformations I've had is just being with people in general, just
Yeah.
being with them, being. And like, it's so funny, you see these people, they're like, uh, us going through all these rituals and all these ceremonies. It's like, wait, you don't have to do any of that, you can just be with here right now. and this
Hmm.
is and this is the part where it starts to get tricky, because it's like, a friend of mine just said this weekend. He's like, everyone wants to do ayahuasca, but no one wants to do the dishes. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like we now have this opportunity, like you were saying. There's so many views that are being thrown at us. There's also so many solutions that are being thrown at us that have never existed before. So we have this in a culture that's all about productivity and getting the result, getting the thing. Like, so much of the spirituality, I find, is like people use meditation as a way to become still so that they can produce better results. And I'm like, wow, that's really not
Yes.
the point of all of this. But it's so intertwined, and it's so intricate.
Thank you for saying that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was curious, because you had mentioned that you had done ayahuasca 15 times.
Hmm. In the U.S.
And
and Peru. I did a retreat. I went to a retreat center in Peru where I did 2 ceremonies, then had a night off, then 3 ceremonies, and had a night off, and then did two, which is the most you can do in a ceremonial way in the world, I think.
Mhm. And so, at what point in your life was this? Was this like kind of when you were going? Because I know that you mentioned that you used to have a very different life. You used to be in the
Yeah,
whole party scene. You were a techno DJ. Was this kind
yeah.
of transitioning out of it, or was this at a later point in your life? And what's your view on it now, as a tool
Mm,
for? Because I personally haven't done it myself, and I've got some views around it. So I'm curious to learn a little bit from someone who has done it, and what your views are.
mm. I'm gonna have to put a lot of pieces together to answer that question, but I'll answer the second question about my views on it. But I can tell you where I was in my life. So when I was living in San Francisco from 2000 until the Bay Area until 2016, I was in the house and techno DJ scene, and so I played
Hmm.
clubs and festivals in the desert, in the jungle, and stuff like that. And I was giving that up. That was not I was not ever I wasn't a musician. Like I'm not naturally someone who's going to sit in front of a computer and make techno beats all day. I was no good at it. I couldn't force
Hmm.
myself to do it. So I had finally given it up. Meanwhile, I had been like I wasn't a techno DJ for a living. It was just something that I would do on the weekends and stuff. But I
Uh-huh.
had always wanted to travel, and so for 16 years, I had worked to sort of make that a possibility, in
Wow.
lots of different ways. And so I made that happen in 2016. And I left the United States. I left San Francisco, sold everything, left, and I went to South America first in March of 2016. And I did that
Mm.
ayahuasca retreat. That would have been in like May, June of 2016. So a couple months later. I had done
Hmm.
ayahuasca before in the United States in the Bay Area, like a weekend thing. So I had had some experience with it.
Okay.
And I was originally not even going to do ayahuasca in Peru because I thought it was so trite. I'm like, oh, how boring. But I got
Mm.
down there and I was like, well, I'm here. Like I might as well,
But in Rome.
like I might as well. So I signed on for that retreat center there. So that's why I ended up doing it then. So my views on it have changed significantly since then.
And where do you stand now?
Hard opposed to all psychedelic use,
Uh,
with very limited exceptions.
And but this is after like how what was your experience like? Was it extremely transformative in your life? What role did it play, those ceremonies?
Yeah, so at the time, what I would have told you was that the ceremonies were very powerful in helping me move past things related to my past and beliefs that I held. They were
Hmm.
very powerful and they were very effective. But what I didn't realize at the time is that they were giving me a very mistaken view of reality, and they were giving me
Mm.
they were giving me a misunderstanding of how things work. So I was trading essentially. I was trading the subjective experience of inner transformation of incremental inner transformation. I was trading that for being very wrong about the way the world works. That's the trade off that I didn't
Mm.
realize I was making.
Wow. And so when did you start to realize that some of these conclusions that you were coming to were faulty? Did it kind of blow up in your face, or what was that process like? And what were those certain beliefs that came up? I'm really fascinated to know.
About me or the belief
Yeah, with
what
yourself,
changed.
like, yeah, like what were those,
Yeah.
those things that came up? You're like, wait, this is not actually correct at all.
Yeah, so one of the things that the inner healing world is really good for is surfacing things like I'm sure you know self-limiting beliefs, things that we believe
Hmm.
about ourselves that are not true,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so one of the things that I experienced with all these techniques is that they were really good for getting deep into the subconscious for the beliefs that were kind of driving my life, right?
Hmm.
And surfacing the lies and seeing that there was truth. I was successful with them. But
Uh-huh.
what changed my perspective was we were talking about it earlier. I started asking questions about the nature of good and evil. In fact, I always had been.
Mhm.
I wanted to find an answer. Like evil is very clearly in the world. There are people, like we said, there are wicked people who do bad things for bad reasons, and I found that I couldn't get anyone within any Eastern religion or New Age to give me a straight answer about it. Like, what if it's all one? Does he get to be all one too? So, what difference does it make if I try to be a quote unquote good person? If I try to be a decent person, if he's a wicked person and he's still all one, why should I bother to even try? Right? And the
That's
answer,
a fascinating. Yeah.
yeah. So that question I kept asking, and people didn't like that I was asking because I was like, no, I want an answer. That doesn't feel right. And so that was one of the contributing factors that led me to Christianity. And so there were. I also you'll love this. I found I went to Burning Man in 2015, um, and I found an underground Christian ministry that they were
Huh.
doing healing. They were doing Christian healing for people. They weren't partying or
Hmm.
anything. They were just there to love people at this festival. And so that's how I got introduced to Christ. That
Wow.
proceeded
No
over.
way.
Yeah, exactly. That's a whole big story about that too. But
Wow.
just to answer the question, I I when I went all the way through the New Age world. I've been to India. You mentioned Yogananda in one of
Yeah.
your answers. I
Yeah.
went to Paramahansa Yoga, his self-realization fellowship. I
Wow.
stayed in the self-realization camp at the
Uh-huh.
Kumbh Mela Hindu festival, which is 190
Wow.
million Hindus. I've
Yeah.
sat in the tree that Babaji was in. I went to the one.
Whoa.
I went to the ashram in. It's not Varanasi, but it's near there. So I've explored all this,
Yeah.
right?
And you're
And
still
so
messing up in life. So clearly
and I,
you did.
yes. Well, we never really stop, right? So I kept asking all the questions. Anyway, it wasn't until 2020 when the pandemic happened that I started asking real questions about evil. Like we can't really deny that something's moving, and that led me to Christ. And then I got baptized in September 2020, so coming up on 3 years ago. And then that
Wow.
has progressively transformed my perspective on everything as it shifted my understanding.
So do you find that the Christian religion was able to give the answer to those questions the way that the Eastern wasn't? I'm also really fascinated by the
Yeah.
Yogananda thing. What was their take on it, or from what you perceived it to be?
Oh, so what happened with Yogananda is so I was reading his book while I was in India, and because as you do, I'll read,
Yeah. When
you
in
know,
Rome.
exactly. So I was reading that book, and then the Kumbh Mela festival plays a big role in that book. And then I realized that it was happening at the same time as I was reading the book, and I was like, "Well, I guess
Wow.
I'm going to the festival." So I did.
Wow.
And true story, the airline lost my bag on the way there, so I went with just the clothes on my back, and I had to go buy a backpack with like a sleeping bag and other clothes. So I went kind of as a pilgrim, so
Wow.
like everyone else, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like the Burning Man of brown people, where everyone's just already covered in dust and wearing tattered clothes.
Yeah, it's exactly yeah, it's yeah, exactly right. It's a good way
Wow.
of thinking about it. Yeah. So
Fascinating.
I wasn't really asking those questions at the time. I was just
Ah,
experiencing
okay.
and gathering data.
I see. You know what? I really admire people who have had, uh, who've kind of poked around things in a different way and studied different things to whatever depth, because then it kind of is like, okay, well, you're not just sold on your own view, you have studied things, and uh, it. I really respect that.
Yeah, that's I wanted answers. And that's one of the things that drew me to your content was that you weren't just accepting the status quo of this world that you were in that we
Mm.
shared. You're like, no, like people need to do better. I have something to say about this and I'm not going to make people happy, but I'm going to say it anyway. And I respect the heck out of that.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. You know what? I am actually really, really proud of myself for that. I'm really grateful I've had that. My entire life, I kind of grew up. I grew up in Pakistan. I grew up in a society where I just didn't agree with the way that things were, and I just was like, no, I don't believe that things should be this way. And I was like, I'll do whatever it takes to do it differently. And I
Mhm.
try not to make an identity around it. I don't know what it is, but I'm just so lucky that I just believe in something and I feel it and I move towards it, and lo and behold, other people feel and believe in it too. So it's really, 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 it's just, yeah, I just feel so fortunate to be able to take the chances to do that, because I just look at society, I'm like, okay, this is the way. And I still, I'm still in my journey of that. I'm like, nah, I think we can do better, but I think doing the better starts with things not accepting the way that things are. And there's still a lot of things that I'm complacent about in my role in the world as a person and as a man, and standing up for what I believe in. There's a lot of uh, incongruencies between my beliefs and what I'm standing up for. But I'm
Mm.
just like, one of the things that I believe in, like how we can relate, and a model for us for living. And I'm like, I don't really care what people think. The way that the status quo is so bad that
Mhm.
wherever I will get to is going to be better. Even if I fail completely horribly, it's still going to be better. So I'm just really, really, really blessed and grateful for myself and for everything that's there to kind of not accept it, because like, if I had accepted the way that things were, I come from a society, it's like, when in Pakistan, when I was born, the doctor was like, congratulations, Mr. Sardar, you have a boy. And my dad was like, you mean I have an engineer? It's like my life was dictated for me is since the moment that I was born. And
Mhm.
it's been really, really challenging to go against the status quo. But the thing is that I can't not do it. There's only
Mhm.
I try to suppress myself. I try not to, but like eventually it just happens. And I'm lucky to be in that position to be like, nah, I'm not going to accept it, that we can do better. And I know I want to do better, and I know that it's possible. And I'm just driven by that. And I hope that I am able to do that in a way for all the areas that I believe in, really create the kind of world that I value.
Do you find that these characters that you create, maybe not all of them, but some of them, do you find that based on maybe I've taken this from some of the things you're saying, do you find that the characters you create help hold you accountable to your higher standards? Like, do you ever look into a character or a sketch and it's like, okay, yeah, that's totally me. I shouldn't do that anymore.
Yeah, totally. Like I think, it's like it's working both ways. A lot of it's observations, a lot of it's my own disappointments with myself, a lot of it's reflections upon my own behavior. It's such an interesting way to examine one's own psyche. So yeah, it's a mix of everything. It's a mix of what's the funniest thing that I can say, what's the most extreme thing, what's something I know has happened to someone, uh, or what that they may feel, what's something that I'm struggling with myself, what's something that I think is just, yeah, it's just combining all of those things and just keep taking shots at it.
I think you said that you've probably upset a few people or maybe lost some friends unintentionally.
Yeah,
Like,
definitely.
comedians pay a high price for what they do.
Yeah, I think it's also, one of the other things that I've learned by watching comedians is that it's their consistency. It's like when you become
Mm,
consistently known for that's what they're going to do, and then people are just like, okay, you either like it or you don't, and people are going to like that. But it takes time to develop that consistency and that kind of thick skin, which I'm not really there with either of those things. That's why all of this is
mm.
just play and practice for me to develop those two things. Um, yeah.
How does it play when you do a live performance? Like, what does that look like up on stage? Like, do people throw things
Oh,
at you?
man, so the live performance thing is just like a recent thing. It's evolved recently, and it's never something I never thought I'd be doing any of the things I've done in my life or have done so far. Um, it's just something that's born out of necessity, like most things in my life. I've been put into
Mm,
positions where I'm just like, yeah, yeah, I'm just like, oh, in order for me to go to this next stage, I just got to do it in this way. So it's kind of an edge that I'm leaning into. One part of my personality is that I'm also, really shy. When I was a kid, my parents were
you don't
really,
strike me as shy.
I know people don't think that. It's like when I'm lit
I
up by
wonder why.
things, then is that, but the people that do know me is like usually, when I was a child, I didn't speak for the longest time. My parents thought there was something
Mm,
wrong with me. So there's these parts that and being on stage and performing is like, people that are singers and actors. Actors are like, I have so much respect for them that they're like, wow. Because it's easy to like be behind a keyboard and say these things, but to say them
yeah.
out loud while there's humans looking at you, and how it's really really difficult. I actually ended up doing a performance last night with my Tantric Dave character, and it was not that great. But it's just like
Mm,
all of these are practice shots, so this is just like me practicing because I know eventually it'll. But it's interesting. I try also not to have this. It'll eventually get to something, or it'll be something, which is something. It's an interesting trap that I find myself in when people are so, so what's going to happen, and like, what are you going to do with this? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just having fun, and I'm letting
mm,
it. I'm trusting that it's going to work in the ways that it needs to, as it's always done in my life. Like, I found that every time I try to define something or say that I have a 2 to 3 year plan, I'm really actually only limiting myself because what's happened has been magical and like exponentially more enriching. I'm not going to say good because there's been challenges, the good and bad, but it's been wilder than I could have ever imagined. So I don't know where this is going to go. I'm practicing the performance part of it, which is something is very very new to me. Writing feels natural, but even then, like even with the writing things, like some of these jokes that I would write, I remember one of the first times when I was, back in that earlier period when I wasn't pursuing this, I wasn't sharing this as much. There was one joke that I wrote that I edited for like 8 hours, no more, 8 to 10 hours. And I was just sitting there. I'm like, what the hell am I doing? I'm a guy that's in close to 40, spending 10 hours writing on a joke. Like, is this what I should be doing with my life? And I still have
mm.
these moments now. It's like, while most of my friends are like really, all the people are just like really working. Most of my days I spend writing jokes and I spend hours doing that. And I'm like, is this the way to go? Like, what am I doing? It's a bizarre reality.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, it's needed. I mean, I think it's important because one of the things that I've observed is that the new age kind of set of beliefs they're kind of merging more into popular culture now. It's kind of difficult to avoid
Mm-hmm.
them. You have like the Aubrey Marcuses, and you have like the Russell Brands, and you have a lot of these
Mm-hmm.
guys that are pretty significant. And it's like, who, everyone on the stage, you all get shots taken at you, and like
Mm-hmm.
your worldview has to stand up to scrutiny, and your character, your
Mm-hmm.
persona has to stand up to scrutiny. And there's
Mm-hmm.
not really a lot of people who do that, because you can only do it from inside the world, because on the outside
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't make sense looking out from the inside. You don't know the lingo, you don't know the, you
Mm-hmm.
don't know the body movements, and you don't know how to put the words together, like tantric what.
Mm-hmm.
But if you
Mm-hmm.
know the lingo, then you're positioned well to be able to, and can use it accurately. You're positioned well to be able to make fun of people that kind of need to be made fun of, frankly.
Yeah, I think, just to toot my own horn, some of this is
Please.
also just like learning to be a comedic writer and being a writer. It's like you
Yeah.
could give me any topic, or for most topics, and I will challenge it. Like I challenge my brain to come up with like anything, as an exercise that I'd like to talk about more, because it makes me sound smart than I actually do. But it's being. I think it's going back to what I was sharing earlier. Is like that moment that I had with my brothers, where we would just be off the top of the head, just be jokes nonstop. I think it develops us, and I don't know which came first. It's like the chicken or the egg, or the masterclass and life coach, which came first. It's like, I don't know if I see things this way, or because I've trained my brain to be this way. I just observe things, and it's just, there's a part of it where it's like, I don't have to be in a certain environment to make a joke about it. So I did the sketch about this joke about maps, the psychedelic conference, and even
Oh yeah.
before I
Oh
land,
yeah.
and to be honest, a lot of the jokes that I do are all pre-written before I've experienced any of it. So yeah, it does help. People are like, oh, you must get so much of it because you live in Tulum or you live in that. And I'm like, yeah, but it's also just like, when you write and you think in this way, you don't. It definitely does help to be a part of it, but you don't have to necessarily be a part of it to know what's what. This is a little bit where the creativity comes in, and I find it to be really interesting when I'm like, I was going into math, hadn't been there. I wrote about four different characters, and it's also really fascinating watching this because, I get to see again what society is thinking. Because the second that as what we're always, for the most part, I think what we're always doing is like trying to reaffirm our beliefs, right, on one level or
Mm.
the other of the way that the world is and the way that we are. And when I'll say something, you'll start to see everyone's beliefs. Like if I'll talk about Tulum, everyone's going to have their opinions about it, usually negative, and it's so fascinating to see that. I'm like, wow, these are the opinions that people have. Some of them who are like, who've never experienced this. I'm like, whoa, it's so interesting how I myself and everyone's just forming these opinions. So some of it's just genius on my part.
It reminds me of so I've been to a lot of the new age enclaves. So I've been to Byron, I've been to, obviously, to Sedona, because I live in Arizona. I've been to
Yeah.
Iquitos, right? And I've also been to Goa. And so, there's different parts of Goa that people can visit. But I've actually been, I guess you might say, backstage into some of the expat hippie kind of community
Yeah.
areas of Goa. And
Yeah.
and of course I've been to Kopangan, Thailand. So I've been to all these places.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is like, when you live in them and you spend time in them rather than just like passing through, you get a sense of what's going on. And it does, I think it does actually help, because again, we talked about earlier, the self-seriousness, because there
Hmm.
is so much self-seriousness in these communities. It's like, guys, like, relax. Why is it so tense here? Like, you're in
Yeah.
paradise, with your
Yeah.
American Express black card.
Yeah. And the other aspect of this is, it's interesting, while we're on this subject. I think part of being a different color and a different nationality is also part of it. I think I've spoken about this with other people of color, is
Yeah.
that, when we have I know I think it was my ex-girlfriend, but they're like, when there's black people around, it'll never get to that level. Like, we'll just keep each other real. We'll just be like, wait, did you just hear what came out of your mouth? And I think that it's really fascinating when I go to a lot of these ceremonies, and like, uh, the people that are leading this, which are almost always white, they
Hmm.
take themselves so like their word, and it's like the space, and it's just like,
Yeah.
oh my god, like it's this prophetic knowledge that's coming from them. Like, I was like, I wish you guys had the checks and balances that most people of color and different minorities have, that you would not get to this position of acting a fool out loud all over, because the people would have just
Mm.
checked you way before. So I think part of that also comes, and this is a really challenging part of it, because for myself as well, is that I grew up in Pakistan for the first 18 years of my life, and then
Mm.
I escaped the enslavement over there, and I came to the West when I was 19, and I lived for another 18 years in the West, and then I escaped that enslavement. So I've been very fortunate to have, uh, a perspective that's seen both sides of it, and it's really, really interesting that, because the first 18, 19 years, I have to remind myself, it's like I'd never seen white people for the first 19 years of my life. So whenever I'm in these
Wow.
spaces, it's still exactly like how, like what a horrible suffering of an existence, like not seeing white people, is
Right.
really, it
Yeah.
was really difficult. It was really difficult. So now when I finally overcame that, uh it's so wild. It's just like being in these spaces, I think, coming from where, and I'm also, it's so coming into these spaces where it's mostly white people, and I'm usually, if not the only one of the few people of color. I'm like, are you guys listening to yourself? What the hell is going on here?
Mhm.
It's really wild. I think also combined with this, the fact that I try to reconcile these parts of me, that I have like this biggest cynical part of me that's so cynical, that's so uh yeah, it's just extremely cynical, that just finds like the most cynical way of looking at everything. But I also have this part of myself that's like the most optimistic and loving, and not necessarily loving, but like just believes in everything, and it's just like almost
Yeah.
naive. And it's these two parts of myself that I'm also, in this comedic process, it's a lot of it's my own healing of like these two parts of it that I have in myself. Like I'll see something, and naturally my brain is in a way that it'll come up with like the most cynical way to look at it. And it's just so interesting to be able to bring all these voices, to bring them forward, and not have it just live in my brain. Have you guys have to
Yeah.
deal with it, because I'm done dealing
Exactly.
with this shit.
It's your problem now,
It's your
Instagram.
problem now. It's yeah.
I remember we've been talking about doing this episode for a while, and I remember you
Yeah,
mentioned that you had grown up in Pakistan, and like that's
yeah,
what a huge transition to move from Pakistan to the United States
yeah,
when you were 19. Like what a
yeah.
huge
18.
shift.
Yeah,
18. Yeah, I mean like what I
18.
mean, where did you move from and where did you move to?
So I used to live in Pakistan, in Karachi. That's the city that I grew up in,
Okay.
and I lived there my entire life. And I'm one of the, in my immediate family, I'm the only one that left. My brothers still
Oh,
live in the home, and they have an amazing life there. But it was like, I was in this position where I kind of grew up in a society which I just fundamentally didn't agree with. I was like, this should not be happening. People should not be treating each other like this. Like, people should, and like women shouldn't be treated this way. And as I'm saying all of this, I'm equally a part of all of this, because I have my blind spots, and I still say these things
sure.
and act in counter to them. But I just had, like, it goes back to what we were saying earlier about how amazing I am. In that I kind of had this feeling that I was like,
He's kidding
nah, I
everybody.
don't. I'm partially. I was like, nah, this is not right. This is not the way that I want things to be. And so, combined with that is like when we were growing up, this is something that's still a part of the, I want to call it the work, but it's kind of the package that I come with, is like this sense of an internalized sense of racism. How the colonialism has worked is that, we were obviously a British colony as well, and there's these ideas that are fed into us at such a young age that, our color of our skin wasn't clean, wasn't as great, and that the whiter you are, the better. If you're a blonde, it's these wild ideas that were cast into my brain when I was such a young child, through watching cartoons that were all made, all the TV programs that we watched were all Western and American. So
Mm.
having this really complex sense of, part of it was this self-loathing and this disgust, that I'm like, oh, that I'm not as amazing or as beautiful as a white person, or the ideals and standards of what beauty are. And it's such a wild journey to be a part of, to be like, whoa, this color and this identity, and it's all. And now I tell people that I'm Pakistani, and that but it's still like, it took me a long time to do that. And I used to be like, oh, and that also became it also I started to tell people that more, because the circles that I was hanging out in were like super, tropical, all these places. So now all of a sudden I became exotic. And it's like,
Yeah.
if my beard is a little bit longer, I start to cross into the terrorism line. So it's like I'm always
Mm.
this version of me is always dealing with these identity things of like color and what it means to be. And so, I kind of grew up and I was like, nah, these things aren't, this is not the way that I want to live. But I also had like the life of a prince, before I moved at the age of 19. I had never made cereal. I didn't know, and I thought beds just made themselves. Like
Oh yeah, obviously.
I grew up in like in this really, really, really incredible golden handcuffs where I was just like, but there's a part of me that was like, no, I want to experience something different. I want to experience a different kind of society. But also, a lot of it was like my personal environment. My family was going through a lot of challenges, and it was there's a lot of turmoil there that I was just consumed by. And I was like, you know what,
Mm.
I need to get out. I need to get out of all this. I need to and the only way that I could get out was to become an engineer. And so I said, I'm going to become an engineer, and that was my way to out of the West. That's how I escaped
I was gonna say, like, that's how you got from Pakistan to here.
to Canada. Yeah, that's why I'm
Okay.
also Canadian. Yeah, I'm also Canadian. I'm not American. I'm also
Okay.
Canadian, and that's how I got to Canada, and that was my way out. And yeah, and it's been really crazy because like that was my way out. But after a certain time I was living, and people don't know this about me, is that some people know this, is that before I was doing all this art, I used to actually be living a very traditional life. I was an engineer. I owned a house. I had white picket fence, beautiful trophy wife. I had all of that. I lived that life as well. And not to
Beautiful
say that I
trophy
would,
wife.
yeah, it's like I had all
Oh,
of it, and not to say I wouldn't go back to it, but it took all of that falling away to start to ask those questions of who am I as a person and what am I here to do. And
oh.
it's been a really, really fascinating journey.
So that's really interesting. Okay, because so you were born in Pakistan. You became an
Yeah,
engineer.
yeah,
Becoming an engineer. I
I
was
was
going to
born
say,
an
how did
engineer.
you were born in? Obviously, you came out
Yeah,
with a
yeah.
protractor.
You're either born, yeah, you're either born an engineer or you're born a wife.
Yes,
That's just how it
yeah.
goes.
So you use that because you left Pakistan. You would have left Pakistan like around 2003, 2004.
Uh-huh.
It's not an
Yeah,
easy time to get over to the West
yeah,
from
yeah,
Pakistan at around that moment.
yeah,
Although it was a good time to
yeah.
leave.
It's a good time to leave. It was, and it was really interesting. It was like, as human beings, when we're just put in these situations where we're creatures of survival, we'll do whatever it takes. And
Hmm.
it's really interesting. It was only so on my 37th year, I actually turned 38 in 4 days. On
Mm,
37, yeah, I decided to go back. I escaped the West, and I fled the West, and I went back because I thought, oh, things are amazing over here. You guys aren't oppressed, but it's a different kind of oppression altogether. It's
uh-huh.
a very invisible one,
Surprise.
yeah, it's a really, really interesting one which we can talk about because like in the East, at least we knew we were suppressed. We knew
Yeah.
the suffering was just apparent. Like there's poverty,
Hmm.
there's oppression from financial oppression, there's cultural religious oppression, but the interesting thing
Corruption.
is corruption and all those things that come with it.
Yeah.
And but the West, especially primarily America, has always been like we're the best and we're the most incredible. And then when I got over here, I'm like, wait, well, I thought that only we were shit, but you guys are actually shit as well. Like we're all
We have our
equally
own
like
shit.
we all have our own shit, and like that's been a really incredible journey because being
Yep.
part of that internalized racism is that we subconsciously or kind of consciously put Westerners or white people in a certain that they're better than us, and these are crazy things that I
Hmm.
still have to deal with, like these implicit conditions and these emotions that I have,
Yeah.
such subconscious stuff that happens, and it's a really crazy journey, like dealing with it and observing with it and feeling guilty and feeling stupid and feeling sad, and it's really wild. But yeah, I got lucky enough to be able to see that that it's just the enslavement over here looks different. It's just that things are just nicer on the outside. It's a more there's more money, there's more money from the empire, so things just look nice. But if you start to look deeper, you're like all of it's also not necessarily a facade, but like all the pain and suffering is just there. In the East, that it was just much more apparent. Over here, it's not as apparent, which I find it to be is just like it's almost in a way more challenging because it's like we're so comfortable. But we see
Yep.
all this shit, but we're so comfortable that we're not willing to face it because, we're living in a society where now, you can numb yourself at any moment. As if it wasn't enough that we had, media. It's fascinating to be in the United States where I'm like, wow, you guys have so many options. Like every person's TV I put on, it's like they've got these 10 networks. They have billions of shows accessible to them. And I'm like, whoa, that's wild to live in this time. So it's really fascinating to be able to have a perspective of both the cultures, of both the perspectives. And it's also really, really, really difficult because take whatever topic that you have, both the Eastern view, almost, I would say, if not almost every single time, most of the time, the views are completely different. And trying to
Mm-hmm.
reconcile these two different value systems at all the time is so complex. It's so complex. I'll give you one example. Is like, from my perspective, is like from my culture when we grew up, it's like we were told these stories of like how to treat a guest and how the guest is God, and like you're supposed to just treat them the best that you can and like give to people. But over here, I come and I'm like, and I'm hearing of all these things of boundaries. Like we don't even know what boundary. I didn't know what boundaries were till like, not to say that that's a good thing, but it's just like it's so different. Like with the view over here is like, oh no, you should have boundaries and give to people and give to them in a certain way and this and that. It's a head trip trying to reconcile all these different views.
Yeah, I mean, I completely understand because that's one of the things that I learned. One of the most valuable things that I learned from my travels was, that every culture, every country has its shit that it's dealing with, and
Mm-hmm.
coming from the American side, we're really bombarded with the shit of America. Like growing up in
Mm-hmm.
the country, there like the media is not shy about telling us how awful America is. What it projects to the outside is, particularly at the time when you were moving here, like George W. Bush, like
Mm-hmm.
we're amazing. But for the past 20 years or so, it's been like,
Mm-hmm.
no, we're terrible, and we should, you know, bend the knee, and we should really feel guilty and ashamed for who we are. And then I traveled. I went the other way. I went to India. I didn't get to Pakistan, but I've been to Kashmir,
Same,
and I've been
same.
to some. Yes. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Exactly. So I got to see like, no, these countries have their shit too, and it's not because of America. It's their
Mm,
own. It's their own
wow.
cult. It's their own cultural, economic, social, religious, familial, oppression is happening here. It's showing
Mhm.
up at a very different level. And so I walked away from that experience being like, everyone in the world has their stuff that they're
Yeah.
dealing with, and I developed a lot of compassion for the human condition as a result of that,
Yeah.
instead of just
Yeah.
believing my country was the source of all evil. Right, to be
Yeah.
like, no, there's something really, there's every different country that I visited has its own set of challenges. America's problems are
Uh-huh.
bigger because we're
Uh-huh.
we're in many ways
Bigger.
we're not the biggest country in the world, but we're the biggest country in the world. Like, we don't have the biggest
Yeah.
population, but we have the largest influence in the world.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so our problems will be bigger and will seem magnified. But that doesn't
Mhm.
mean if I go to a country like Vanuatu, which is like a small archipelago in the South Pacific, they have their problems too, and they're just as real
Mhm.
and they're just as present. And so that really helped me
Mhm.
see. That's how I
Yeah.
reconcile with the it's like,
Yeah.
wow, how do I put these together? Like, we're here on Earth, and there is something called the human condition, and suffering is
Yeah.
one of the big characteristics of it.
Yeah. I'm also really, yeah, exactly how you're saying is that I'm also really grateful that I got a chance to have these different data points and different
Mm-hmm.
perspectives, because we only grew up with the perspectives for the most part. And, some, and some people, I was sharing this with a friend of mine is that, I got so lucky to be able to do this, to get all these different data points to get a more accurate, well, at least a slightly less skewed perspective. But also is like people are like, well, it's not just that you were lucky. Yes, you are lucky because I'm truly one of the few people that I know that grew up in Pakistan and is sitting in the places in the world that I am. Like I usually go into space.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I'm the only one that's grew up there. Not that my parents were there and I was born here. It's like, no, I grew up there. I spent half my life there, and I'm in these spaces, and I try to be in a state of like gratitude because like it's so rare that someone gets to do this, and the fact that I get to do this is like, man, it has to be of some benefit to others in some way or the other. Not that that's what gives it meaning, but it's like man, in such a fortunate position in my life. I would love to be able to use this as a way to contribute to other people as well, rather than. And that's one of the things that I'm most excited about in the coming years, and some of the ideas that I have, to see them come to fruition. But yeah, I'm really grateful that you've also had the chance to have the different perspective. And one of the things that I've realized is that the kind of people there's strands of people that I'm drawn towards, with that we have a deeper bond, and it's usually people who have experienced different cultures,
Hmm.
because and that just gives them a perspective, because usually it's like, implicitly we're just like, my way is the right way. And if you happen to be in a country where you're the where I wouldn't say that, I don't know if that's statistically true or not, if white people are the majority in the United States, but yeah, it's to
I
just
think it
have
is.
those yeah, to have those views. So I'm drawn to people that have had culture, that have it's also very different, because when people have lived in different countries, they have a different sense of, and this is also something that I struggle with, of like, how to be in spaces, because like we don't have this idea of something being mine. It doesn't exist. It's like, there was never mine. Like, it's just like, everything is all of ours.
Oh, sure,
And
yeah.
so it's really wild coming into these places where everything is like, over here, a lot of the people I go to eat, and they're like, this is my dish and this is my thing, and it's so wild. So I'm really drawn to people that have had a different exposure, and people that have some sort of religious influence on them as well.
Mm,
Surprisingly, I'm drawn to those people as well. And I'm
mm.
curious to know. I mean, you kind of mentioned your own religious thing, but you didn't grow up religious, did you?
I didn't grow up religious, but I did grow up Jewish, which isn't. Didn't grow up religious, but we were doing the things, but I wouldn't say it was ever really about God in any
Wow.
grounded way.
And I'd like to come back to that. And the third kind of person that
Yeah.
I find that I get really along with, that I find a deep resonance, is people who are professionals, have some sort of critical, like, scientific background, or have
Mm,
studied something really deeply, that I'm like, oh wow, you think about things. It's not just, you have a process of critical understanding, and questioning things, and looking at things and data, rather than just being moved by emotions. So
hmm.
those are the kinds of people that I'm finding myself being most drawn to. Coming So I just wanted to ask you, so what
Hmm.
was that like for your family, to go from Judaism to being, I'm a Christian now?
I lost all of my family except for my dad. I'm not invited to Thanksgiving anymore. I don't hear from him anymore. It
Wow.
was explicitly over that too. There was an intervention that was done. They confronted me with it by surprise, and
Wow.
yeah. So I talk to my dad regularly. I still bump into my cousin at a local cigar bar, and we're cool. We were never like super close anyway, but we're still cool. But the rest of the family, rest of my family, like I don't have any contact with them anymore.
Damn.
Mm.
Wow. I had something similar with my with me. It was the other way around. My father, my father disowned me like 10 years ago, and he's never spoken to
Oh,
me a single word since then. Yeah,
wait, why?
it's really, really
Oh,
difficult.
I'm so sorry, man.
Well, yeah, man, it's really, really complex, and it's really challenging. There's how it actually occurred was that it was when I told him that I'd kind of decided that I was going to live in this way, because he had my life all set out for me,
Not
and
being
he
an
made
engineer.
yeah, it was just like,
Yeah.
how it actually occurred was like when I was about 27 and I'd finally graduated from engineering school. I kind of did all the things that he wanted to, and he was going to come to my graduation ceremony. And this was like one of his biggest joys, like, to see his son being an engineer. Because at that time I was the
Mm,
only one that graduated, and like, I was the quote unquote golden child. And, I kind of told him, I was like, Dad, when you come here, there's a girl that I would like you to meet. And he said that I was dead to him, and he never spoke to me ever again after that.
because there was a wait, because there was a girl you
There's a
wanted
girl
him to
that I
meet?
wanted to meet, and it was just, it was kind of something that was against his view of how things should be.
Was
And
she the wrong
it's
color?
she was the wrong. I think, there's so many layers to it. There's so many layers to it that I'm also, part of it's just like, there's the, coming from this culture where it's super patriarchal and masculine dominated, and
In
it was like,
unhealthy ways.
in unhealthy ways, is that it's his way or the highway, and that's just what he wanted. It's just like,
Mm,
if you're not going to listen to what I have to say, there's elements of control. It's like, it's so complex, because there's elements of
yeah.
like control, but there's also elements of like genuinely believing that that's the best for me, and wanting the best for me. And it's just like, it's so complex to go through all these layers, because it's never really one thing. Like it'd be easier to be like, oh, he is also that he's a narcissist, or he wants things in a certain way, and that's about it. But and it's so confusing to hold all these different possible things in one view. It's just like, well, could it also be that this and this and this and this and this and this and this, and it's really mind grabbing. So that for me, that's also kind of going back to the original thing of like not standing for the status quo. Is for me to do the things that I do and what it's cost me, it's like there's
Hmm.
no other way. I'm not going to back down from it. It's like the amount of, what it takes to be an artist and a performer on its own is something that's just so remarkable because of how challenging that is, to be a person of color and an immigrant. And I try not to create
Hmm.
my identity around it because I'm way bigger than that. But like, it's kind of like when people ask me, they're like, why are you so gung-ho about this, or you're going to do this, or are you going to do this? I'm just like, dude, I'm not here to settle for these things, because like I've gone through so much shit. Like if I had to settle, I would have settled back there. I would have never been here. But something in me
Hmm.
causes me not to settle. And like, the things that the price that I've had to pay for it, to be outcast from my own family in that way, is just like, it's like there's no stopping. It's just like I'm going to keep going. I'm here to do all these things, and none of it like is going to ever let me stop in living out the ideals and ideas that I'm so deeply moved by. Because I think about these
Hmm.
things all the time, about how the way that I want to live and how I think it. And it's just like, nah, man, I've gone through a lot of stuff to give up, and quite frankly, the status quo is not worth it. I'm not interested in being a part of it.
Hmm. Yeah, you did the first of all, like, thank you for that, and I'm sorry for the grief and the loss, and I'm sorry
Yeah,
for what must be 10 years of pain to have to make a
yeah,
hard choice like that. Because I think
yeah.
for those of us, for those of us who are fortunate enough to grow up with fathers, to grow up with intact homes, because that's not
Mhm,
everyone's experience these days, but and
mhm,
especially to grow up in an achievement oriented culture, where it's
mhm,
like you're where your success matters to the family. That was my upbringing, like,
mhm.
to be a
That was mine
professional.
too.
And yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so to not be that, right? To be
Mhm,
like, that somehow is not me. It doesn't fit. It's not
mhm,
working. And
mhm.
to feel, the harder you push for it, the more it starts to fall apart. And then to
Yeah.
actually have to be like, am I going to do this? And what is this going to do? Because when I became Christian, that was my worry. It's like, am I going to lose my
Mm.
dad over this?
Yeah,
Right.
wow.
And I'm very grateful that I didn't.
That's
But I
beautiful.
was like, but I definitely faced down what you're experiencing now. It's like, okay, I have to confront my own father with the truth about who I am, and take
Yeah.
that risk. Like, am I gonna? Okay,
Wow.
I'm just gonna make it through. And so you took that risk, and you've been living with it for 10 years. And so
Yeah,
I can. And it's hard. It's hard. And you
it really
have you
is.
spoke? You haven't spoken since then at all, or?
He chooses not to speak to me. I've tried to speak to him. It's
Uh,
just, it's I can also see it from his perspective. It's just like there's so much expectation and so much pain and so much. It's like I think he doesn't want to open those doors, and it's not for me to force that upon him. I pray for it that one day he's able to open those doors. But man, it's just so crazy. It's just so there's it's so wild, and this was part of my struggle when I was growing up. And it's just like how is like having the discernment between the culture, the values, the religion, and the society.
yeah.
When I was growing up, I didn't have that. All of it just seemed one. And like, I
Hmm.
speaking about my self-contempt, a lot of my self-contempt came from the fact that I was Muslim, that I was Islamic, and how the world views Islamic people for the most part. And that even too, I've been able to go beyond, because I know that it's an unconscious thing. I have my unconscious biases about people and about races and about whatnot. So it's been really, really, it's a really crazy journey to see. When I was younger, all of it was like, I'm bad because I'm Muslim and this is what Muslim people do. And a lot of it was to see the way that women were treated, to be honest, because
Hmm.
seeing how my mother was treated in certain situations, or how society, coming back to this is, it's the same point. It's interesting how that keeps coming back again. It's like when I was growing up, I saw that I was in the situation where there was a lot of turmoil in my home, and my father
Hmm.
being an incredible, from he kind of grew up in this classical age where a man was defined by being a provider, and he was and still is to this day an incredible provider, and
Hmm.
an incredible, his role was also to challenge his children and to give them discipline, and he was incredible at doing all those things. So in his, not to just say anything like that, it's just like from how he was told what a man was or how he perceived it to be, he was doing a really, really, really incredible job, and he still continues
Yeah.
to do that. And I'm so grateful. I know people whose fathers weren't there, and my father was, he was there in the ways that he thought of being there, which was being a financial provider, and
Yep.
and maybe he wasn't able to be there physically, emotionally as much because he was working so much or didn't have those tools. But I want to acknowledge that's just that is how it was. But the part of it was like, seeing the way that the women were treated, and when I was young, is that we had no place to go, we had no place to escape, and we were in this predicament of being with the person that really loves us and takes care of us so much, but also just had a bad temper. And I noticed that society had failed us. I was like, wow, I have no place to go. We have no place to go and be safe. And that's where my first, when I was really young, I was like, whoa, society's really fucked up. Society's,
Mm.
and now that I start to connect these dots, like, no wonder I'm a satirist. No wonder I'm this way, It's like, of course, because like at a very young age, I saw how we were failing. And I'm like, whoa, these adults have failed me. And it was such a, it's such, this is one of the things that I'm so passionate about, and I want this to be something that I make a contribution is just like giving people places of safety, because like we really have failed so much as a society, and in so many of these areas where the vulnerable people aren't protected in, whether that's women or children or minorities or animals or nature, not to say nature is vulnerable, but the way that we've exploited it. So it started at a very young age where I was like, whoa, society is really messed up. And I think that's kind of that's also stuck with me. And it was at a very later age in my life that I started to, that I'm still, dismantling all these, like, what part is culture, what part is religion, what part is patriarchy, what part is society, what part is, because all of it can get so easily blended up into one.
Hmm.
And the way that the patriarchal model was created, at least to my understanding, was that they
Muslim
used
one.
all, yeah, is that they use all these things to support their own belief that, oh, even the religion says that the man is supposed to be the superior and is this, and even the culture says that. So I had to say no to all of it, and now I'm in the process of reconciling that, and it's of like reconciling those differences. And we are, that's what all the comedy and the satire is about, is about all those traumas that we as human beings have faced, the traumas of power, sex, god, money, religion, family, all these things, and race, all these things that are core causes of these traumas, is to like now start to talk about them, to start to share them, to start to examine them in different ways. And it's a really, really fascinating part of this journey, to be able to separate these things, to be like, hey, what exactly is what, and yeah, it's so wild. It's so wild.
Yeah, I mean, what I hear, thank you, and I can relate to all of that because, I can. What I hear is that your conscience is very much driving you. Something is wrong. This is not right. I can't quite say
Mm-hmm.
why it's wrong, but now I'm going to go look for answers that help me know why what I'm experiencing, what I've been subjected to, all that, and even things that I've done are wrong, and
Mm-hmm.
that's so important because a
Excuse me.
lot of people, yeah, yeah,
My laptop's about to die.
no problem.
Yes.
Yeah. So a lot of people, I can just cut that out. So a lot of people don't have that sense, or they don't have a sense that they don't have that same well-developed sense that tells them that something's wrong. Or if they have that developed sense, they're too passive to do anything about it, or they're afraid to do anything about it, or they're afraid to ask the questions. And that's one of the things that I think is so important about what you're doing, and that is important about the I guess you might say the new age world in general, is that it does act that there are sincere people that ask sincere
Mm-hmm.
questions, that are troubled about why things are the way they are, and they go looking, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
that's something that's so important, and that and I can relate to all that because that was me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, what, like, this is not right. As soon as I became aware that things were not right, I went looking for answers. And
Mm-hmm.
and that's a very noble thing, because a lot of people they don't understand that impulse. And that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the reasons why this moment in history is so scary, because you and I, and I'm sure many listening, can look around and see how wrong things are, and also see at the same time there are some people who are like, what do you mean it's fine? What are you talking about? It's fine. Like, are you paying
Mm-hmm.
attention? And so that I honor that sense of conscience in you that wants to take apart your culture, your upbringing, your background, the culture that you moved
Mm-hmm.
to, your
Mm-hmm.
goals, your choices, your decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is so powerful and it's so
So
strong. And I
powerful.
honor you for that.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I am so, it used to be like I used to feel that being born a Pakistani Muslim guy was like this horrible disadvantage that I had, this crippled
Mm,
thing that I have. And, I still bounce from both sides of it because it's not something necessarily that makes me better, but I'm just lucky to have had these experiences that I had, growing up in the kind of society and in the family system that I did. I'm so grateful for all of those experiences to inform where I want to be, where I want to lead this, where I want to make contributions in my life. It's
Do you
really,
have
really
time for
exciting.
just a couple more questions? I know you've
Yeah,
probably got a
sure.
life. Okay, cool. So when you were, so it sounds to me that and I can relate to this as well, that you had built up this life for yourself as an engineer, right? Very financially successful, materially successful,
Hmm.
and then you had something happened. You had a moment where it all kind of started
Hmm.
unwinding, and you
Hmm.
chose a new path. Like,
Hmm.
what happened there? Was it an awakening? Was it like a
Hmm.
screw this? Like, what was
Hmm.
that? Because I had no idea. I had no idea, but it
Hmm.
makes a lot of sense
Yeah,
now.
yeah. Uh, you know, I'll answer that, and I'm also in that same period right now. So I'll get to
Oh,
that as well and how it's interesting.
yes.
At that point, it was just like I was kind of going along with the program of like what was expected of me, and I didn't really question it too much. It's interesting because like I wasn't. There's a part of me that had these questions, but there's also part of me that for many years was not. Like I was not into any sort of conscious things.
Yep.
I always had faith because when I grew up, I had the religious aspect was there, so I had this belief and I had this inner connection to God. Uh, but when I was there, it's like so. What had happened was I was 27 and I'd been with my girlfriend for 7 years, and she broke up with me.
Mm,
We were about to get married, and like this is the woman that I had basically told to my family and been turned like my family, my father
mm,
had kind of left me for, and I was like.
mm.
And so basically, when that happened, my entire world was just pulled out from under my feet. I was at the
Yeah.
age of 27. I had no idea who I was because I'd spent 7 years of my life in partnership with this person. So I'm like, wait, who am I? What do I want? And it was just like not being able to find that within myself to be like, well, I don't even know what I want. What's going on? Like, what am I interested about? And because like when I was growing up, I was always this really, really artistic kid. I was always creative, but then I was writing books before I could speak. Like I would just write and draw and like make mixtapes. I would do all these creative things. But then, of course, we start to get older, and I was told that I had to be serious and that I had to do serious things. And like, so there's a part of me that for many, many years didn't really question this path. It was just, uh, and then when that happened, when I was 27, she broke up with me, and that just rocked my world. And
Hmm.
so the next 2 years, I spent in 2, 3 years of just sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It was just a party lifestyle, sex, drugs, rock and roll. And what was funny was like I owned a house with her, and she basically gave me money, which I call alimony, and she gave me that money, and so basically I had this huge amount of cash, and I was making a lot of money as an engineer and blowing a lot of it on drugs and women. And I was a womanizer and an alcoholic, and a functioning alcoholic, not like drinking every day, but
Hmm.
excessively drinking, binging, womanizing, and all those things. And what had happened was, and I was kind of perfectly cool with that lifestyle. It's just like there's a lot of people like I always knew that I was going to do this thing. It's like I didn't know any of this shit. I was perfectly cool when at that age I was like, you know, I'm cool being the old bachelor guy that you see who's in his 50s and it's just with women and it's just like, he spent all his money on himself and he just looks younger than everyone. Is just like smoking, drinking, partying in his 50s. I was like, I'm cool with being that guy.
Mhm.
I can't wait. And then what happened was one of my friends, two of my friends and I, we did this thing. They brought me into it. They're like, we're going to do this sobriety thing with alcohol. And I was like, I am not doing it. You guys have the problem. I'm chilling. I'm happy with myself. Like, I'm
I'm
cool. I
chilling.
like this. I like it. I'm like, I can see the downside of it, but I'm okay with it. And what had happened then was we did this thing called 90 Days Without My Whiskey Ways. And I basically didn't drink for 90 days. And what happened then
Mm.
was actually once I prior to this, prior to that leading up point, what happened was that so I was making a lot of money, engineer, got a lot of money, everything's going good, but like that's when it started to happen where I was like, wait, I'm still not fulfilled. Like I've got this incredible life, I've got this beautiful apartment, people over at my house, and I was like, wait, and that's when I started to scratch this itch of like, wait, I think I'm meant to create. I think I'm meant to be creative. I think I'm starting to, because none of this stuff was bringing me fulfillment anymore. It's like I did it for a little while, but I was like, nah, this is not it. This is not it. And I started to, but the thing was, I would always be so hungover or drunk or intoxicated that I could never make art. And so I was like, okay, this needs
Yeah.
to stop. But I was still so deep into it that I couldn't stop. And then what happened was the 90 days down my whiskey waste thing happened. And the most incredible thing that happened out of it was my relationship to women changed.
Mhm.
Prior to that, it was like a sexual sobriety that happened without even knowing it. Prior to that, I was, engaging. I was meeting women mostly either drinking or at after parties at the end of the night where it was just about like getting something from them, like using them either to
Yeah.
conquest, or at the end of the night where I'm feeling shit and I just want to unload and just take something from them. And that's when I
Mm.
started to first experience my sexual connection with a woman, where it was not about taking, and it was about being there, and it was like I'm not trying to get anything from her. It was just like we were in this moment and just sharing and experiencing, and that was extremely profound.
Mm.
It was life changing. So that's kind of when I started down my path of. That's when I started to make a big change, and I ended up doing. So what I did was I did a vision quest that took me to the four corners and the four elements of the world, four elements in the four corners of the world. That's a story I think I'll tell for the next time. But in each of these, there was like a successive, in each chapter, I faced a different element and a different answer was unveiled to me about my path and what I was meant to be doing here.
Mm.
At that part, at that time, the question that I had was like, am I meant to be an artist? And, it's been almost 8 to 9 years where I've been living completely as an artist. And
Mm.
it's been really, really, really profound. And the point that I'm at
Wow.
right now is, I'm also again in that point, which happened last year, is that I've been very lucky to have, the lifestyle. I've lived a very, very, very incredible lifestyle because I also, after I became an artist, somehow I became a body painter and I basically travel the world painting. I've been to most of the luxury places. I've been to really, really cool parties. I've had really peak experiences. I've lived in beautiful places. I've lived primarily in tropical locations, luxury locations all over the world for most of like my last 6 years. And I was sitting, this happened like a couple of months ago, and I was like, wait, I'm still not happy. It's like I've
Yep.
got all these things, I've got all the experiences, but I'm like, but what's happening? It's like I can't. I was like, wow, I'm unable to experience any of this. This is just me adding things on top of each other. It's just like, oh no,
Yeah.
maybe I need to experience this, or maybe I need to go here, or maybe I need to do that retreat, or maybe I need to have that friend. But I was like, but I'm not here. I'm like, I'm not here at all. I'm asleep. And it was like the saddest thing is just like, realizing that all the time, all of it's always right here. It's always been, and yet we continue to look for it in different things. And it's just like the most heartbreaking thing about being human of like, all of this thing that we need is just here in this moment always, but we miss it. And we keep on missing it. And we spend our entire lives missing it. And we do all these other things to to fill that lack of presence that we're able to cultivate. So I'm kind of in that position right now again because I'm like, okay, I've done most of the things I see in my life. I'm turning 38. I'm like, okay, the seeds that I've sown, everything's on an upward trajectory. My personal development, everything, but still my level of being able to be with myself is not there. And so I'm kind of in that away. I'm kind of in that transitioning phase again in my life. It'll be like, what's actually really important. I'm lucky that I've got all these things going on, but it's like waking up to a different reality that's, none of this is really what brings happiness. And that happiness is always inside of us. There's things that we can do to share. And that's what I've started to realize, like, man, what actually brings more. And I've been so lucky because I've got amazing friends that did this for me. One of my friends did this thing for me where he gave me a simple phone sim, and that phone sim didn't even cost him, literally cost him nothing. But every time I went around the world and I could just use that phone, I blessed him. I was like, oh man, thank God to him. And I was like, wait, so maybe there is something more to it than just having things for myself. Maybe there is more joy in being able to share things with others. So that's kind of where the path that I'm starting to move towards, of cultivating that space of stillness within myself, to know that, hey, I find it's so interesting. This is the thing what I was talking about earlier, as the questions of why this is happening is like, why are we as a society so driven by success and ambition and having these things? What are the things that are missing that we're trying to fulfill? And that's what I'm learning. So I'm back in this really exciting phase of like, what's really meaningful, what's really giving value to life, and it's not the path that I was headed down. So it's an exciting place to be in.
Hmm. Yeah, man. I know where you're at. I've been a body painter, but certainly I haven't done that, but certainly I've had my own experiences in those worlds that you're talking about, and certainly I've gotten to the end of the material journey and found that no peak experience is
No,
sustainable, and that no accomplishment, lasts more than a week off the high,
it
and
doesn't.
there's a
It
come down
doesn't.
from every drug, and there's a breakup at the end of every sexual experience, except for
Hmm.
hopefully marriage. But
Yeah.
and that depends on your view of marriage as well, like how you a lot of people view even marriage as temporary also. But that it seems that in all the things that the world tells us we should find fulfillment in, that there's no durable fulfillment to be found in any of the things in the world. And so
Hmm.
then what do? Well, if we're very sincere about wanting to find answers, we turn inwards to try and find the peace
Hmm.
within ourselves, that we can't find in the
Hmm.
outer world. And so
Hmm.
I've walked that road as well. And so now I'm sort of at a place where it's like, well, part of me, like half of me is like, well, you know, I can talk about that, and part of me is also, out of respect to you, wants to honor you in your path, and I'm a little conflicted with that, because I've walked that road, and so while I want to honor you, I also, and
Hmm.
I don't want to give, I hope you can understand like what I'm trying to say. It's like, ah, there's stay on that road. Don't let, like, here, this is what I did. I let my conscience continue to guide me in the way that your conscience has guided you. That you're like,
Hmm.
this is not satisfying. I've
Hmm.
done all the things. I've done okay,
Hmm.
and it doesn't stick. The happiness that
Hmm.
I thought that I would get when when I did this, or I experienced that, or went
Hmm.
there, or drank that, or smoked that, or whatever, it doesn't
Hmm.
stay. It goes away.
Hmm.
So where
Hmm.
can I find something that's durable? And I
Hmm.
continued to allow my conscience to guide me through
Hmm.
that path, and I never quit.
Hmm.
I was like,
Hmm.
okay, no, this is not the answer. This is still not the answer. And
Hmm.
so ultimately that led me to the one place, because I asked
Hmm.
all the other questions. It led me to the one place that I was told never to go. And
Hmm.
that place was Christianity. That's the place
Hmm.
you're never to go. And so I
Hmm.
tried everything else. I got to do it. And it's
Hmm.
like, it's, and that led me right to the edge. Like, well, maybe it's here.
Hmm. Hmm.
I can say that I found what I was looking for.
Wow. Yeah, it's yeah, it is the conscious being guided by that. It's just so beautiful to be able to see that, step outside of yourself, to be like, wow, just observe it, to be like, this person is just being guided by these values. It's really, really beautiful. So now I'm in this place of what I discovered when I was asking these questions. I was like, wait, but none of this really means that much. So, and what I came to the contemplation was it came down to one word, and that was aloneness. And the two
Mm-hmm.
sides of aloneness, the side of being unable to be alone with our minds. And this, I think, is like the cause. So everything that I think so much of what we're seeing in society is actually not the cause, it's the symptoms. Like this capitalism, this greed, this power, or this fear, this productivity, all the things that that we could say are the are the challenges of society, they're not the cause. There's something deeper there,
Yes.
and it has to be something simpler. It's like these are all things that we're doing to mask what's actually there, and what's actually there is that we're this primal sense of disconnection, of like not being cast away out of heaven or to be cast out of the divinity, but that divinity is always there. It's always been there, and so it's just to reestablish that connection with it. So the first time, and these are the things that I'm committed to in my life, and I'm sharing this quite publicly. I've never really
Mm.
shared this with publicly. I've shared it with other people in my personal interactions, but never, on. In a way like this, is like the two sides of aloneness. So the one side of the aloneness is the inability to be in our own minds and be with ourselves, which is so difficult. It's like it's
Hmm.
so difficult. I struggle with it so much. I struggle with it so much, and this is something that I practice. I practice this for hours, and I do it, and I still struggle with it so much. I still struggle with it so much, and this is what happens. This is what creates the compassion, because you're like, wow, I'm like, man, I practice this so much, and I struggle with it so much. Imagine all the other people who aren't practicing, or who don't have the privilege to, like, man, my morning routine. I was making a joke about it. My morning routine, it does take me up till 2 p.m. I'm so lucky that I've created a life that's like that. That I have
Mm.
the spaces. I don't have kids. I don't have any responsibilities.
Mm.
All those things that I make jokes about, but like, imagine if I'm struggling with it. Not to say that I'm incredible, just saying that I'm spending time and effort. Imagine what it's like for the other people. I
Hmm.
can't even
Yeah.
imagine what, like,
Go ahead.
is this leads to the compassion part of it, and then the other side of it. So that's kind of what my practice has been, and what I desire deeply is to. So I'm studying mindfulness, and I desire deeply to share this with it's already happening all over the world. Not to say that I'm the savior bringing this or anything, but I want to be. I want it to be accessible to more people, especially in Pakistan and in areas, because I also had a cousin of mine that committed suicide, a teenage cousin, and I
Mm.
can't imagine the pressures that teenagers now have on them. I don't know what it's like. I think you and I are close to the same age. I'm 38. How old are you?
I'm 45.
Okay, so generally, a couple of years, but like
Mm.
kids growing up now with like all this, bombardment with what there should be and what they should look like, and like all the stimulation in society is like it's really, really, it's really bad. The state that it is really, really bad. Like in our personal interactions, I could see it, like how overstimulated we are, how little that quality of presence that we have is just so fleeting. So that's the side of it that I would like to make an impact of it within my life and with the life of others, the aloneness. And then the inability to be alone. And then the other side of the aloneness is the fact that people are so isolated. Like now more than ever,
Yeah.
it'd be nice to say that in the East, we have a little bit of a, again, this is generalization, and part of my romanticization with the East as part of probably a response to, the internalized loathing and whatnot. I try not to look into too many layers, but there's this different way that we have of being with each other, and I find that not to be the case over here in the West, because like I think people are just driven so deeply by. There's this thing that we have over there is like, maybe you experienced it when you were in the mela, in the Comela. It's just like there's this way that we can take care of each other that's unspoken, that doesn't really exist out here. Over here, when I'm here, it's like if I don't do it, I'm dead. So we're
Hmm.
constantly, all my friends are constantly like, we're all, and these are like conscious, really amazing dudes. Like, but
Yeah.
we're all still trying to gather as much resources. And like, if we're lucky, by the time we're 45, we figured out the money equation, and then we start to do the passions, and then we start to do our missions and our dreams. But first, we're still all living under this thing. So I found that that's the other part of it is that's missing. Again, it's like if our minds can be still, and if we are embedded in a deep web of relationships, so much of what we're seeing in society and I'm seeing in my life can really, I really do believe that these two sides of it. I'm sure I'm open to hearing other components to it, but I think that these are two real major ingredients of like having deep human connections and being able to be alone with yourself. And I think that's what I'm really driven by, and that's what I would like to make a meaningful contribution in life. Those two
Yeah.
areas.
I completely agree that thank you for calling out the hyper individualism of the West, where it's like I got to get mine, and it's not that we all just wake up and decide that one day we got to get
No,
ours. This is the culture of living in the United States, as we take our
Uh-huh.
individualism is at once our greatest
Uh-huh.
blessing, and it's also our
Uh-huh.
greatest burden, because in the United
Uh-huh.
States, this is one of the things that I observed while traveling. Like, if you grow up in a small town in India or China, or pick
Yeah.
pick any pick any
Uh-huh.
developing nation, right?
Uh-huh.
If you grow up in a small town and you want to move to the big city, depending on the almost depending on the religious or cultural background of your parents, if you do that, they will tell you, like, you're dead to us. You don't
Mhm.
leave your town, right?
Mhm.
Like, our culture says you can't leave. Our religion says you can't
Mhm.
leave. Our family, no one leaves. We stay here. And anyone who
Mhm.
leaves is thereby dead to us, because only someone who's
Mhm.
dead would leave, right?
Mhm.
So, but in America, it's exactly opposite. Whereas if you grow up in a small town and you want to go to the big city, there is
Mhm.
not a single claim that anyone can make on you that can hold you
Mhm.
back. And that's a big
Mhm.
source of the romanticization of the American culture,
Mhm.
of like,
Mhm.
our individualism runs so deep into our
Mhm.
bones, into our marrow. That's who
Mhm.
we are. There's a great
Mhm.
blessing in that it makes America a very innovative country, but there's a
Yeah,
very enormous psychological burden, like,
there
I'm on
is.
my
Yeah,
own.
I'm
Right.
on your own.
That when
Yeah,
you go to another country and you see the hospitality, and
yeah,
you see particularly Muslim countries, they can be,
yes,
and India as well, they can be
yeah,
so hospitable and so
yeah,
warm. Please come
yeah,
in. Here's my entire
yeah,
family. Right. We
yeah,
don't have that here, but
yeah.
because they have the communal
Uh-huh.
thing, which can be toxic and destructive in its own way, right, as
Exactly.
you experienced. But
Mhm.
there's that blessing. We traded all that for hyper individualism,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
we're now discovering, we have discovered the great limits
Mhm.
of that, as you
Yeah,
are, because once you get all the stuff, why am I
yeah,
still not happy?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
I feel alone, right?
Don't get me wrong. I still want more stuff, but I know
Of course.
that. Yeah,
Don't we all? Yeah, of course.
yeah. Yeah, but that's really it, and it's really fascinating seeing. It's like, even in these healing communities, what I see is people talk all about communities, but I'm like, yo, you guys, it's so fascinating, the levels of the unconsciousness that we have, the inherent. So first of all, another interesting thing is like this idea of a country is developing, right? So why is a country developing? It's because it's primarily because it's poor. So it's
Yeah.
so fascinating that that this is how deep those patriarchal conditioning goes. That our worth is equated by how much money we make.
In
Is that,
many cases, yes.
in many cases, and it's just like, wait, could it be that they're not as financially developed? Who's to say that this country is not developed? Because you're only measuring them from mostly financial, economic, so
Right.
political,
I
and
mean, economically
economically.
developed. Yeah,
But that's what I mean. It's like such a nuance in our language that it's just like, oh, it's a develop. But like, what if we had, going back, our measure of what development meant was how we take care of human beings and how many homeless people there are. Like, it's just
sure.
really interesting to see that level uh, of of conditioning that we have. And you had mentioned another point there. It seemed to be escaping me at this point. You had said about being outcast. What was the last point you mentioned?
About being communal living versus
The communal.
individualized,
Yes, yes. So that's the other thing. It's really
especially in New
fascinating when I.
York.
Well, yeah, when I come here, it's like I hear people talking about communities, especially spiritual communities, and people doing. But I'm like, this is when I was living in Tulum. This is one of the reasons why I left. It was so difficult. I found myself so isolated. The only way that
Yeah.
I could be around other human beings was if I was doing medicine, or if I was
Hmm.
paying to go to events. And I'm like, wait, what happened to human beings just hanging out? What a lot of the spiritual communities consider as community are just customers. They're not community.
Yep.
It's like, it's people who pay to be a part of your life, and it's just so fascinating to see. And it's, I'm seeing that people are starting to sense that, wait, what we think is community is actually not community. It's like, what is that word? What does this word mean? And like, what does it mean to be in communion with each other? And people are
Hmm.
starting to question that because it's not what they thought it was.
That's right. That's right. You're talking about the isolation. Like, there's the two halves of isolation. One is isolation from each other, and
Mm-hmm.
also our inability to be with ourselves. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
real restlessness of soul that gets
Mm-hmm.
created. Like, why
Mm-hmm.
can't my soul come to rest? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't I come into reconciliation with
Mm-hmm.
myself? Why can't I
Mm-hmm.
come into reconciliation with others, including people who I don't necessarily agree with or who I have grievances against? And why
Mm-hmm.
can't I come into reconciliation with the way things are? And that deep
Mm-hmm.
restlessness of soul is so powerful. And that's what the conscience that we're talking about picks up on. It's like, this is not
Mm-hmm.
right. Something, the pieces are not fitting, like the Morpheus says in the Matrix, like a splinter in your mind driving you
Mhm.
mad. You can put all the
Mhm.
pieces together. It's like, something still doesn't fit. And
Yeah.
that's the essence of the sincere heart of a spiritual journey in the broadest sense.
Wow. Yeah, even with that, sometimes I wonder, is like, is this just, and that's what I'm examining, is like, is that also just a response of my inability to be with where I am and what is right now? So again, cultivating both those sides of it, like being driven by that gut feeling, while at the same time being able to be there with all of it in every moment. That's where the practice is leading me.
Yeah, and also like, what does it all mean, right? Not just
Hmm.
like, how do I be with myself and my life and my choices? Like, what does this whole life thing mean? Why are we here?
Hmm.
Why care? Right? Like,
Hmm.
why even ask the questions? Right? I'm sure you know a lot of people in your
Hmm.
world who are like, like, they would laugh at you asking deep questions like this. Like, what do you mean? I'm
Hmm.
here to get money and get drunk and, maybe pop out a few kids, or maybe party until I can't anymore. It's like there's got to be something. But people uh like you and I think me are like, well, there's deeper questions about meaning and existence here that are swimming around all of this. Why am I the way that I am? Why did I make the decisions I did? Why did my dad make the
Hmm.
decisions he did?
Hmm.
Why is my country the way it is? These All these questions
Hmm.
are very linked to our inability of our soul to find rest.
Hmm.
Some many of us.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really fascinating. I also try at the same time to not make it about an identity in either going to asking these questions, but it just kind of naturally occurs. So
Hmm.
it's kind of seemed to lead me in interesting places, and it's nice. I don't know. It's just I can't help it. It just happens.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I know it's getting a little bit late there, but
Mhm.
just curious, like, what your what, like, I know that you said that you don't think a couple years out, but like, if you could have it all your way, what would happen with these characters that you've created? What would they represent to you and to your
Oh,
life and to the people around you?
well, one of the things. One of the things, as I mentioned, is about the other side of the aloneness is in
Mm,
relations. Is I want these to be ways in which. Uh, they heal relations of human beings, relations with ourselves, the relations that we have with the people in the environment around us. One of the ones that I'm really, really excited about is the character of Tantric Dave. It's like I would like to. What I'm moving towards is creating spaces for healing of relations between men and women, and using
mm,
comedy as a vehicle for that. So that's one of the things I'm really, really passionate about, and I've contributed towards it on both sides of it, on both sides of the equation.
sure.
And so I would love, like, it'd be my dream, because like I was like, okay, I could do the stand up and, like, getting over the fact that it's difficult. But I was like, I don't think it would mean that much other than that, oh, people like me and I was funny. But I was like, this is what's so deep with me. It's like, if I can use art in a way, or a skill that I have, or a talent that I have, in a way that makes a difference in something that I really care about, which is I really care about the relations between men and women, and because I found it to be the cause of, and that'll lead us to a whole other podcast, because I know you have a lot to say about that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want, to get to it briefly.
Sure.
But yeah, it's just like it's been the cause of so much of my, like, relations in general, and then where the relations get the most complex I've experienced for myself is where it's the most different is with women. So I'm like, wow, we can't. It's like we can't live with them, we can't live without them, but we have to learn to live with them, and like be able to appreciate, like, the gift that each of us is for each other. The
Yeah.
gift that we have, that we were incarnated into this existence to give to each other. It's like there's nothing like it, man. This is what all those battles have been fought. This is where all those people left their tribe to go for. This is where all those epic empires were built and fought against. It's just that reverence of that woman, of that divine feminine, whatever it. And as I speak about these, I might make some, I'll put my foot in my mouth with all the genders and the masculinity and the femininity and all those things. And I'll be the first one to admit I'm not really. I'll make mistakes in all those things, but that deep yearning for that other half, if we will call it, or to be
Mm-hmm.
experienced through that, is like, it's just, it drives all of us on such a deep way, as part of that soul's, the thing that you were saying, of like that reconciliation. And I think this reconciliation is built into us, and it's like, it's like the most incredible moments that we have, whether or not, wherever you lie in your spectrum of sex and sexuality, is that space that you were in with your mother. at least till now, all of us were born to in a woman's womb. That space that we had, we all remember that primordial space of that just peace and that bliss that we're a part of, that we, again, I think connects back to the soul part, is like us trying to reconcile that. And so I see the comedy making a difference. That would be the most meaningful for me. All the fame and stuff doesn't matter. Get me, as long as it gets me more women. But I think what I really would care about is what would make me really, really happy is if I can make a mark in that aspect for people. And what I would really like to see that happening is entire communities partaking in that, and us healing these relations. And I've experienced that. I've experienced it. I've studied it. I know it's possible. I study it and I experience it continuously, and I still make mistakes in it, but I still experience it continuously. And so I would like to see the comedy make a difference over there. um, that's the only one that I've really thought about. I try to leave it up open because, like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know who's going to see it. I don't know what's going to happen. It's all part of, in my life, I'm just kind of, it goes back to that instinct. I'm just like a bumbling idiot. I just kind of do things. And then I look back at it and I always figure out, oh, crap, that's what it was. That's why I was doing it. For example, like my clothing line, when I designed it, never thought I was going to be a designer ever. And my clothes are primarily bought by people that travel to luxury places and
Yeah.
that go to Burning Man. I didn't know what Burning Man was. I'd never seen Burning Man, never even heard of it. I'd never been to a tropical location outside because I was a Pakistani and I couldn't travel anywhere. So all these things, these natural inclinations that I move towards, I just follow the flow of it. And it's only when I look back, I'm like, oh, that's what happened. So I'm kind of like this bumbling fool that's just lost and drunk on his own potion and just going ahead with it. So I have no idea where it's going to go, and I know for sure it's only going to go in incredible places, and I just hope that it makes an impact for people, and it can uplift people, because the one side of it is like it's hard to hear for some people, and I don't want to put people down, but I just hope that it contributes meaningfully to our relations and our ability to be with each other and to be with ourselves and to be really truthful with ourselves.
Yeah, that's everything I'm about. To reconciliation between men and women, with
Yeah,
ourselves, with our
yeah,
relationships, and our
yeah,
relationship with God and the divine. Like all, like that
yeah,
is everything,
yeah.
everything that I've been about, and for as long as I've known that I'm about anything.
Wow. That's really profound. I've had that part of the religious reconciliation as well, because that's one of the biggest traumas that we have. And it's been really fascinating approaching these things, growing up in a way where I was like, wait, we're so violent and we're so oppressive and all of these things, and then you know having approached it from different perspectives. I studied a little bit of Buddhism, a little bit of Hinduism, nothing too extensively, but enough to be a coach. And I just looked at these and I was like, wow, it's when we start to develop, like, what's actually being said here, what's the essence of the message, and
Yeah.
being able to take it with a little bit of grain of salt, but like finding the essence. So it's this really exciting period that I imagine other people are on as well. It's like this recalibration of all these things that we thought were good or weren't good, and we're like, okay, well, this works. And now, when you're at a certain age, and hopefully you've had some more experiences, that you're like, okay, I'm like, okay, I see some things that work over here. Like, nothing's all bad or all good. It's like, the American society and the Western society is really amazing at certain things, and the
Yeah.
Eastern society is really amazing at certain things. And what does that reconciliation look like, and how can we reconcile with all these these traumas of power, of authority, of money, of sex, of religion, of God and race, and that, I think, that just kind of ends up being the physical journey of the actual journey that we are living, and through which we get an opportunity to be back into our holy state.
Hmm. Yeah, and you're sort of making me realize there's a couple different answers in the world of spirituality to this, and one is that we have to escape reality, right? That's a little bit what
Mm-hmm.
Buddhism says, is you have to untie the knot of your own consciousness, right? And this is
Mm-hmm.
the strange contradiction that lives at the heart of the New Age world. Like, we're trying to cultivate ourselves to be better, and at the same time we're trying to get enlightenment and to unwind our consciousness entirely. Like,
Yeah,
those
how
two
does that
goals are
happen?
going the well, those are the enlightenment and betterment, but those two things are completely contradictory. And
Mm-hmm.
the other is to have such a profound contact with reality and punch through it all to see to see the creator behind it, and to understand how the creator opens up a way for us to come into reconciliation with him and to find meaning that way. And those are the two paths. And so I've walked the other path and reached the end of it. And so I chose the second one.
Nice. Well, that's beautiful for you. I'm really happy to hear that. And may people
Yeah.
be able to find whatever it is that they believe will lead them to that for themselves, and may we all be able to be peaceful with ourselves. And it doesn't, I don't even have to say the other, because when we're peaceful with ourselves, that's all of it's encompassed in that.
Yeah. Like, keep asking hard questions. Don't ever stop asking hard questions, and don't be afraid of the answers. That's the most important. That's the most important thing for people of conscience, is like, okay, what's the hard question here? And let me ask this question and answer it, and not to be afraid of the answer, not to ever be afraid of the truth. And that's how we can guide our lives and our society back. Again, because we live. There's a longer conversation here, obviously, for the next time, but the lies are pervasive, and so we have to punch through them all with the power of our conscience to truth.
Beautiful. Well said.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and with your energy and with your effort getting ready for that little skit. Thank you so much. I didn't anticipate that we'd be talking until 10 o'clock your time, but I've really, really super enjoyed this.
I really enjoyed it as well, man.
Spontaneous philosophical discussion. So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I feel like we could continue going into it, but my friend's house that I've overtaken, he's just sitting in the corner over there. I was like, I'm doing a podcast. You just make yourself silent. It's been really, really beautiful. I can see, this is just the thing. One of those examples of, like, things happen. There's an appreciation and a connection, and you only find out later on. Like, you're looking back and like, oh, of course we get along. These are the things. These are the things that we share and value. The same values that we share. So it's been really a pleasure to be able to share, to have the space to share, and to be able to chat about all these things that I'm fascinated by.
Yeah, super, super appreciative of your time and generosity of spirit and your sharing.
Likewise.
So, yeah, and there's much more to talk about. That would be great over not a whiskey. So that would be a great conversation for us to have personally sometime. So where would you like to send men to find out more about you and what you do?
Well, I wouldn't just say men. I think just anyone.
Men and women.
I haven't
listeners.
Yeah, you know what? It's this gradual unveiling that's happening. So people don't really know that I do a lot of the things that I do. Like with the work between men and women. And I used to come at it from this perspective, and this is another space that I'm finding out. It's like, what's the space of trust versus achievement? Because in certain cultures, it's just, in spaces, it's just all about, you have the will to power, and that plays a role. But I don't know. So I trust that it's going to unfold in the way that it needs to unfold, with respect to the relational work, and just to speak a point to the relation work, it's not about me being a therapist or counselor for people. It's about using community as a way of doing that. Is using community as a way of holding that space, because it takes like they say, it takes a village to raise a child. And we used to be embedded in these deep relations, where in a web of relations that held an individual. But ever since we traded those, the we for the I, we got so much out of it. We got all these amazing appliances and screens and all these things, and but we traded that. And so I think is that this is also why. So why do we need so many coaches in relationship? It's like, once we get embedded back into this relationship and we have shared values of what we're trying to achieve, whether that's through a religion or through a personal set of values, like, there's so much magic going to happen. So I think people just keep playing along with me, and you're going to see all of it being unveiled as I see it unveiled, because I don't know what's happening either. I'm just bubbling through it. I think for now, Instagram is a great place to be. There's a mailing list there so that you could be more intimately connected with it. But yeah, that's really where it is, and I'm really also so grateful for people that play along with me, and just are a part of this with me. It's so amazing to, like, ask these questions and to have all of it.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this whole conversation. It's been like playtime.
Thanks,
it's like
man.
we can play with the character during the skit, and then we can play with ideas here. So this is
been
everything
equally,
it's about.
The second part of it's been equally as fun. It's so beautiful to be able to have spaces to delve into all these things that I find interesting.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and please thank your friend on behalf of me
My
and all the
pleasure.
listeners.
Yeah, all the listeners, thank you for letting me use your house. Yeah, he's gonna be famous. He doesn't know it yet. Anyways, thank you,
Exactly.
thank you, Will. I really
Cheers.
appreciate it. Ciao, bro.